very difficult being the child of revolutionaries. And I wonder, is there any part of you that has felt, that identifies with that sentiment?
I would say it is difficult being the child of a revolutionary, but I don't resent it. I know that what she's doing is necessary, and the people of Burma have suffered far greater than I ever have. So, you know.
Keir Myers, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
Thank you, Alan.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in somewhat for Marcy Marcusa this morning. She came in feeling a little hoarse in her voice. You'll be able to hear that beautiful voice. She'll pop in for doing some traffic later. We're going to do a little role reversal this morning. But in with us this morning, also, we have Abby Adeyemi behind the glass and the controls, and Kevin Nibatebo making us look good on YouTube. Also, with her voice as crisp and clear as ever, is Heather Wells in with a look at news headlines. Hello there, Heather.
Good morning. Well, we are still waiting, Corey, to learn if 25,000 healthcare support workers in Manitoba are going to walk off the job this morning. The workers represented by MGEU and CUPE have set a strike deadline of 6 this morning. Those who would be impacted are healthcare aides and support staff who work in hospitals, personal care homes, and home care. Shared Health and the unions have been working to try to come to terms on, among other things, wages. So we should know in just minutes if those workers will be on the job or on the picket line. We'll hear about that through the morning. As well, hundreds of people turned out last night for a vigil to remember the victims of October 7th in Israel. The Jewish Federation of Winnipeg organized a walk for Israel at the Asper Jewish Community Campus. Premier Rob Canoe was there, telling the vigil the province will continue offering support during this difficult period. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Continuing throughout the morning as we wait to hear news about that strike, we will be speaking with someone who is a resident at Deer Lodge about how that strike could impact them. Also, this hour on this show, we're going to hear from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection after the sentencing of a Winnipeg football coach yesterday who was convicted of sexual abuse and luring. Also, stay tuned later this coming hour. We're going to speak with Sarah Ritchie, Ottawa News editor for the Canadian Press, about a debate in the House of Commons and how it stalled most other business. Also, right now, more Canadians are using buy now, pay later options. We're going to dig into how this impacts consumer debt and long-term financial habits. Looking for towards another nice, beautiful, almost summery day, dare I say, here in Manitoba today. 5 degrees right now at the Forks, heading for a high of 19.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
How do you become one of the world's most influential stylists when you have no formal training in fashion? Law Roach will tell you how his love for clothes took him from shopping in thrift stores with his grandmother to styling the likes of Zendaya and Celine Dion.
I almost had to build the plane while I was flying it.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. The winner of this year's Nobel Prize in Physics is a Canadian. Geoffrey Hinton is known as the godfather of artificial intelligence. He is also a professor at the University of Toronto, and he is sharing the prestigious award with John Hopfield, a Princeton University researcher. The CBC's Julia Chapman has the details.
I'm flabbergasted. I had no idea this would happen. I'm very surprised.
Geoffrey Hinton received news of his Nobel Prize at a hotel in California. The University of Toronto professor won for his work in machine learning, training computers to recognize patterns in data. Hinton says the artificial intelligence era will be akin to the Industrial Revolution, but rather than surpassing human physical strength, technology will outstrip human intellectual powers. Geoffrey Hinton spent many years working for Google in AI development. He quit his role there last year, warning about the existential risks of the technology.
We also have to worry about a number of possible bad consequences, particularly the threat of these things getting out of control.
The two winners will share the prize money of 1.4 million Canadian dollars. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
A dire warning as Florida waits for Hurricane Milton. Here is Tampa Mayor Jane Castor.
I can say without any dramatization whatsoever, if you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you're going to die.
This morning, Milton was downgraded to a Category 4 storm, but officials say it could regain strength. Hurricane Milton is packing winds of 250 kilometers per hour. That could cause a dangerous storm surge and flying debris. Most of Florida's west coast is now under a hurricane warning, and hundreds of thousands of people are under evacuation orders. Milton will make landfall tomorrow in the Tampa Bay region. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is making the rounds on American television and podcasts. She's making her case for president with the election just 28 days away. In an interview with 60 Minutes last night, Harris was pushed on her presidential platform and her current record on issues like immigration and the war in Ukraine. The CBC's Ithil Musa joins me now from Washington. And Ithil, what can you tell us about Harris's latest sit-down interview?
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris was pressed on some key issues last night, including immigration, the economy, and the war in Ukraine. When it comes to the U.S. border, Harris refused repeatedly to say whether she should have acted earlier to restrict illegal immigration into the United States. Harris was also asked about how she planned to pay for her economic proposals, which include giving tax breaks to first-time home buyers and people starting small businesses. Here's what she had to say.
I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes. It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations.
On the war in Ukraine, Harris also said she would not sit down with Russian President Vladimir Putin to negotiate an end to the fighting without Ukraine's involvement.
Ithil, this morning, former U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to sit down with leaders in the Latino community, but he's made some controversial remarks about migrants.
Yes, and this is not the first time. In his latest interview on a radio talk show, Trump made some controversial comments regarding murders allegedly committed by immigrants living illegally in the U.S., saying it's, quote, in their genes. Trump was criticizing Kamala Harris's policies on the southern border when he made those statements, blaming her for an increase in crime allegedly committed by migrants. Trump's campaign team defends his recent comments, saying he was referring to murderers, not migrants.
Thank you, Ithil.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ithil Musa in Washington. Hezbollah says its capabilities are still intact despite the death of one of its key leaders and weeks of Israeli airstrikes. Israel's military says its missiles have killed Suhail Hossein Hosseini in Beirut. He was reportedly in charge of coordinating weapons logistics for Hezbollah, and as the IDF says, it is expanding its ground invasion into southwestern Lebanon. The Lebanese army says it is ready to defend its territory. In Ottawa, Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly is demanding an apology from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. He accused Joly of pandering to supporters of Hamas yesterday in the House of Commons. Later at a memorial in Ottawa, Poilievre paid tribute to the victims of the October 7 attack. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was also there, and as Tom Perry tells us, there were sharp differences in the two leaders' speeches and the responses they received.
It is now my honor to welcome the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to the podium.
A respectful but by no means gushing welcome as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau offered sympathy and support to the Jewish community and called out Israel's enemies by name.
Terrorist organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps still seek to harm Jews just because they are Jews.
That part of Trudeau's message was well received, though it was the next speaker who got the loudest applause.
Shalom. Merci.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre had some standing and cheering, with a speech that blamed the Liberals for rising anti-Semitism in Canada and vowed a Conservative government would pursue policies at home and abroad that were staunchly pro-Israel.
I will vote against anti-Israel resolutions at the United Nations. I will back Israel's right to defend itself, which includes retaliating against those that attack Israel.
Poilievre says he'd back Israeli strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities and oil installations on a night that had a memorial feeling at times more like a political rally. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
The main suspect in the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann has been cleared of a series of sexual offenses in an unrelated trial. 47-year-old Christian Bruckner is already serving a jail term in Germany for rape. This morning, he was acquitted of multiple sexual abuse charges. They dated back to a time period between 2000 and 2017 in Portugal. Bruckner has not been charged in the case of Madeleine McCann. The British girl disappeared in Portugal in 2007 and has never been found. An Ontario judge says a longtime volunteer with Scouts Canada was wrongfully dismissed. 86-year-old Wayne Hannon spent more than 70 years at the organization, but his latest application renewal was denied. An Ontario Superior Court justice is suggesting his age may have been a factor. The CBC's Guy Kenville reports.
This is what my Queen Scout, which at the time it was the highest level you could obtain as a scouting award.
In the office of his Ottawa lawyer, Wayne Hannon shows off a table's worth of Scouts Canada accolades going back decades, including a paddle with his name carved in it.
They apparently had to send it to Toronto to get my name in the scout troop, and this is their...
Hannon has been sharing seafaring skills with Scouts since the days of Diefenbaker. 3 years ago, after his wife died.
Well, it was the major thing for me to do.
Last November, though, Hannon's application to renew his volunteer status was denied. Scouts Canada cited safety concerns and said he was resistant to program adaptation. But now, an Ontario Superior Court judge says there was no compelling evidence against Hannon. He also notes the case involved suggestions of age discrimination that could warrant a look from Ontario's Human Rights Tribunal, and that Scouts Canada, in relying on hearsay evidence, was deeply unfair to an elderly and long-serving volunteer like Hannon.
There was no safety concern, and
lawyer Sean Grassi says the case also shows volunteers have a basic right to fairness, and that it's sad Hannon had to go to court over it.
His main goal has always been to get back out on the water, and we're hopeful that this decision provides a pathway for him to do that.
The judge ordered Scouts Canada to consider any new application from Hannon. Scouts Canada declined an interview and says it's taking the decision seriously and is mulling its next steps. Guy Kenville, CBC News, Ottawa.
An expedition organizer says 5 Russian mountaineers have died on a trek in Nepal. They were climbing the world's 7th highest peak, Mount Dalgiri. They disappeared Sunday. A rescue helicopter has now spotted their bodies, but it's unclear if their bodies will be brought home. That kind of mission requires extensive planning, rescue workers, and equipment. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Manitoba, you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app and on YouTube. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in today for Marcy Marcusa, who you still will hear from very shortly, and you're going to hear why I'm sitting in the host seat today very shortly. Coming up this hour on the show, we're going to hear from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection after the sentencing of a Winnipeg football coach yesterday who was convicted of sexual abuse and luring. Also this hour on the show, by now, Pay later is gaining popularity in Canada, with credit card companies jumping on board. We're going to hear about the potential pitfalls of that approach to paying for things. Also, we're going to speak with Sarah Ritchie, she's the Ottawa news editor for the Canadian Press, about a debate in the House of Commons and how it stalled most other business. That's all coming up and much, much more here on Information Radio. Stay tuned. First, though, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, we have just been notified by CUPE there will be no strike by healthcare support staff in Manitoba. A strike was supposed to begin at 6 o'clock. That was the strike deadline this morning. Dale Edmonds at CUPE telling our colleagues at Radio Canada this morning that a tentative deal has been reached, calling it substantial and recommending acceptance to our members. That's the 25,000 healthcare support staff who would have gone on strike. They were members of MGEU and CUPE. So as it stands now, we are learning there will be no strike. They now have a tentative deal. So we'll hear more about that coming up as well. A former high school football coach convicted of sexually abusing players was sentenced to 20 years in prison yesterday. Kelsey McClay had pleaded guilty last year to multiple counts of sexual assault and luring. We're going to hear some of what the judge had to say coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at the weather now with Abby Ediemi. Hello there.
Good morning. A spillover from yesterday. The lights were still on display last night. So beautiful northern lights on display last night. Clear skies we had all through, like from the morning till bedtime yesterday. We had clear skies, and that is the condition into this morning. Across the province, though, we should be seeing sunny skies. We see highs ranging from like 5 in Churchill to 22 for Brandon and Steinbach. Currently, Winnipeg, it is 5 degrees. It's clear outside. We should be expecting sunny and beautiful day ahead. We do warm up to 19 with a light southwest breeze, which will be developing sometime around the noon period. And then as we get into the evening, it clears up, and then we see more like cool temperatures dropping to around 7. In other regions, currently cloudy in the north, but we'll see a mix of sun and clouds later. And down south, we're going to see mainly sunny skies with highs in the 20s. Currently, temperatures hovering near 7 degrees. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 5.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
So if you're wondering why I've been sitting in the host chair this morning, well, Marcy is still here, and you're about to hear why I'm here. Good morning, Marcy.
Hi, good morning.
Marcy is our temporary studio director and keeping an eye on the
Let me just say this. So it is way more fun over there.
Right?
Like, it's pretty awesome over there.
It's supposed to be a secret. Don't tell people.
It's like a party. You're like in here alone.
I know.
I'm usually in here alone. I'm over there with Abby. Angelina's in shadowing this morning.
I know.
It's awesome.
When you get to make fun of you, it's great.
Nevertheless, I'm masked up just as a precaution. Obviously, I'm a little craggy. I'm saving my voice. We have a big week of special programming, and we have Communities in Focus tomorrow. So thank you, Corey, for filling in. We've got quite a show ahead. I am here just to remind you of the traffic line if you need to reach us. I just checked on Traffic Management Center. It doesn't look like anything major started yet in terms of issues at 6:14 a.m. on your Tuesday. But call us if you need, please. 788-3093.
Well, a former Winnipeg high school football coach was sentenced to 20 years in prison. 54-year-old Kelsey McCay pleaded guilty last year to 9 counts of sexual assault and 2 counts of luring. The victims were football players, all in their teens between 15 and 18 years old, that he coached between 2003 and 2016. And during the sentencing hearing yesterday, Judge Raymond Wyant addressed McCay's victims and their supporters as he read his decision. He said, quote, "From the bottom of my heart, what happened to you was not your fault. The guilt lies squarely on the shoulders of Mr. McCay." He said, "You were children. You were guiltless. You put your faith in the hands of someone you saw as a friend, as a mentor, as a teacher, as a coach, as someone larger than life to you." End quote. Monique St. Germain is the legal counsel for the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, who's been following the case, and she joins us now by phone. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I know you weren't at the courtroom yesterday, but what was your reaction to the sentence of 20 years?
Well, what we've been seeing across Canada over the past several years is an increase in sentences for these types of offenses. So a 20-year sentence is certainly on the higher side for this type of behavior, but we have to keep in mind that there were a number of victims here, and years of devastation for them. So, this is a sentence that is reflective of where we're at as a society in terms of denouncing this type of behavior.
No, I actually also understand the Canadian Centre for Child Protection submitted a community impact statement to the courts in this case.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about what was all in there?
So a community impact statement, for those of your listeners who aren't familiar with it, is a little bit different from a victim impact statement. Victim impact statements have been around for a long time, and the individual victims of the offender complete those types of statements. A community impact statement may cover similar ground, except for that it's on behalf of a community. So in this instance, the statement that we filed was on behalf of the community of Canadians impacted by child sexual abuse and exploitation in educational and sport environments. So what we focused on was what victims and others that are tied to those types of scenarios have said about how the incident had impacted them. And the purpose of a community impact statement really is to convey the broader themes in a courtroom setting to sort of, help illustrate that there is harm beyond the immediate victims in the situation.
And I know one of those themes was betrayal.
Correct.
Can you kind of go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, we hear from a lot of different people, Canadians, who come into us after any sort of incident has occurred. And a common theme that we will hear about is the sort of sense of the betrayal of trust by the person who has committed the act, as well as the institutions that they were in, because there's generally a sense that, there may have been more that could have been done, or people may feel guilt about, sort of their own maybe something that they didn't see or that they wished they had saw, and a betrayal of trust is one of the major themes that we will see coming through.
So I know Kelsey McKay was a long-time Winnipeg coach, someone who was also a role model in the football community. Yet, this isn't an isolated case. Obviously, we reported on teachers, former hockey coaches accused of sexual abuse before. So why does this keep happening?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to say. Child sexual abuse has unfortunately been around for many years. What we are getting better at as a society is addressing these situations when they do come to light. But what we need to recall and remember is that thus far, we really have relied on victims themselves to come forward and disclose the abuse. And we really have to get past that because for many victims, it is incredibly difficult for them to come forward. It takes years in some instances for somebody to be ready to come forward. And in some cases, people don't tell anyone at all. So we have to build safer institutions and policies and procedures around the way that kids are allowed to be interacted with in these environments, and we need to be firm in correcting behavior when we see it. So I understand in this example, and this is just one of many examples from around the country, that there were, many instances that people were aware of this individual having the players over to his home and, sort of unusually close relationships with the kids that could be observed by other people. So, these are the sorts of things that it's unusual in these types of environments for that to be occurring, and it needs to be called out before we get to the point where we've got criminal acts occurring.
What do you think we still need? You kind of hinted a little bit, but to protect kids from becoming victims of abuse by people in positions of trust, particularly in the education system.
Right. Well, transparency, openness, and accountability are sort of the cornerstones of creating safer environments for children. So, one thing that we have to recognize is that we're not always going to know that somebody is a predator just by, looking at them or observing their behavior. What we have to get better at is ensuring that when something occurs, we are addressing it and that we have the means to address it short of criminal law until we get to that point. So, having appropriate policies and procedures and following those policies and procedures, having some transparent and accountable mechanisms through which parents and others can raise concerns about behaviors and activities that are going on within the school environment, and recognizing that we're not necessarily, that this isn't about the person, this is about the behavior.
I think we just lost Monique there. Okay, we can we just lost Monique. I think we can try to get her back. In the meantime, though, that is Monique St. Germain. She's a general counsel for the Canadian Centre for Child Protection.
Coming up on today's call-in conversation, it's Fire Prevention Week, and we want to know what questions you have about preventing fires in the home. We'll be joined by Doug Sinclair, Public Education Coordinator with the Winnipeg Fire and Paramedic Service. He'll tell us what starts most fires in the home and what you should do if a fire breaks out. That's coming up on Radio News.
6:21 right now. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Apologies for losing that line there. In the meantime, though, you want to keep an eye on the news. We're actually following a story right now, still ahead. There is a big developing story this morning. There's actually going to be no healthcare support workers strike in Manitoba. We've heard that there's been a tentative deal reached, a substantive deal reached, and we will be hearing more throughout the news. Stay tuned for that. We're going to have more details at 6:30 with Heather Wells. Well, right now on the show, though, buy now, pay later may seem like an option for shoppers wanting to make big purchases with little upfront costs, but with nearly half of Canadians in credit card debt and 1 in 5 without savings, is this trend helping or leading to more financial trouble? Natasha McMillan is here to weigh in. She's the director of everyday banking with ratehub.ca. Hello there. So how do these buy now, pay later programs work?
Buy now, pay later programs allow consumers to purchase items by paying a portion of that total cost upfront. Then they can pay the remaining balances in interest-free installments, typically spread over a few weeks or months. And so it makes it easier to afford these larger purchases without needing to pay the full amount immediately. As you're applying for a buy now, pay later program, typically a soft credit check is conducted, but that does not have any impact to your credit score or your financial health.
So what makes these buy now, pay later so appealing to customers?
So buy now, pay later programs are so appealing because it helps consumers manage their budgets more easily by spreading the cost of a purchase over time. So it allows those who might not be able to afford the full amount upfront to make these purchases and avoid interest fees and payments than if they were to use a typical kind of credit card method. And so some of this can be more beneficial than the traditional credit products, the fees that those would impose.
So a lot of Canadians already have this month-to-month credit card debt. So what kind of risks do regular buy now, pay later users face when they take this option?
So while buy now, pay later programs can be an exceptionally helpful tool, it is only helpful as long as you can manage the payments responsibly. They come with risks if consumers take on more than they can handle. So by missing payments, it can lead to late fees and may negatively impact your credit score. So can kind of lead to future kind of damage to your financial health, can limit potential purchases or loans or larger kind of mortgage implications through that credit score. But if you're looking on the smaller scale, by managing perhaps multiple of these buy now, pay later accounts, it can be easy to kind of lose track of those payments, which may lead to further debt accumulation.
And how do these these late fees, how do they compare in terms of cost to these interest rates? Are they exorbitant when all of a sudden you find out, that you owe them?
So it can vary by the different providers. So typically some of them, if in the event of missing a payment, your account will be paused. And so you'll only be charged a late fee if you don't log in and attempt to make a payment. Some of them tend to be more punitive and operate more kind of on debts and interest rates as high as 29%, which is higher than that you would see of a credit card. So it really depends on the program that you're using through that kind of checkout process.
So how would these buy now, pay later, options affect consumers' long-term financial habits then, say compared to just regular financing?
Yeah. So while they offer, again, kind of flexibility for consumers, it can lead to consumers overextending themselves by juggling multiple payment plans. If you consistently miss these payments, again, leading to kind of great debt accumulation, which will cause kind of further financial strain. It can have that kind of negative impact on your credit score, affecting future financial health, and impact your ability to get some of those kind of larger loan products like a mortgage in the future.
So it's weird to say, but I already saw Christmas decorations in the grocery store. So, the holiday season is coming, and it always kind of starts way earlier than you think. So what alternatives do these buy now, pay later plans, should people consider as they start thinking about spending a whole bunch of money on people?
Yeah, so to avoid some of the potential pitfalls with a buy now, pay later program, some of the strategies consumers can keep in mind is perhaps building a sinking fund to save for some of these future purchases. Whether it's the holiday season or a larger purchase, it's always helpful to have that kind of saving account to the side that you can draw upon as needed. Another one that has been helpful is trying to use cash more frequently for your everyday purchases. This allows kind of consumers to be aware of how much they're spending and is a little harder on the wallet and your hands as a tap process would be. So it keeps you aware of your budget and the expenses that you probably otherwise would forget because it's so easy to tap. Another thing to consider for the holiday season in particular is it possible to do any kind of homemade gifts, some DIY projects, or even giving experiences? This can allow you to either kind of stagger your spending over several months or even kind of minimizing the spending altogether if you're looking at kind of a DIY gift.
Well, Natasha, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Natasha McMillan is the Director of Everyday Banking with ratehub.ca. We got time for a little bit of music before news here. Who doesn't love a good cover tune? And if you're a fan of the band Blink-182, you might love this next one. Maya Malkin collaborated with the band's drummer on a version of All the Small Things.
All the small things, true care, truth brings. I'll take one lift, your ride, best trip. Always, I know you'll be at my show, watching, waiting, commiserating. Say it ain't so, I will not go. Turn the lights off, carry me home. Late night, come home, work sucks, I know. She left me roses by the stairs. Surprises let me know she cares. Say it ain't so, I will not go. Turn the lights off, carry me home.
Well, that song's going to be stuck in my head all morning. That's Maya Milkin's cover of Blink-182's All the Small Things. Still to come here on Information Radio, Quebec's pension fund says it's ready to back Couche-Tard in its quest for the 7-Eleven chain. We're also going to hear about a debate in the House of Commons and how it stalled most other business going on. That's all coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 5 degrees, and after the northern lights were showing off last night, we've got brilliant sunshine today, along with some warmth. A high this afternoon of 19. Healthcare support workers and those who depend on them are breathing a sigh of relief today. A strike by 25,000 members of CUPE and MGEU has been averted, and it came down to the wire. Dale Edmonds at CUPE says a tentative deal has been reached. It was reached at 4:25 this morning, just under 2 hours before the deadline. We will hear more details through the morning, but Dale Edmonds at CUPE calls the tentative deal substantial, and he says the union is recommending acceptance. So all those who relied on home care workers or any kind of health care support, the strike has been averted. A disgraced former Winnipeg high school football coach has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for sexually abusing 9 players for more than a decade. Judge Raymond Wyant told Kelsey McKay there is no cure for the havoc he wreaked, adding, "Shame on you." Wyant also spoke to the victims, saying from the bottom of his heart what happened to them was not their fault. Kelsey McKay coached the Churchill Bulldogs and the Vincent Massey Trojans. He is now 54 and was still actively coaching and teaching phys ed at Vincent Massey when he was arrested back in 2022. You can read more about the sentence on our website this morning. Remembering the victims of the October 7th attack on Israel. Hundreds at a vigil in Winnipeg last night. The Jewish Federation of Winnipeg organized a walk for Israel at the Asper Jewish Community Campus. Federation President Paula Parks says this past year has seen a rise in anti-Semitism.
Our children feel it on campuses. Our friends feel it in everyday life. But amid this darkness, we have found light in our unity and the resilience of our people.
Representatives from all 3 levels of government were there, including Premier Wab Kinew and Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris appeared in a primetime interview on CBS last night. 60 Minutes correspondent Bill Whitaker conducted the interview, asking the Democratic presidential candidate about the prospects of a negotiated deal to end the war in Ukraine.
Would you meet with President Vladimir Putin to negotiate a solution to the war in Ukraine?
Not bilaterally without Ukraine. No. Ukraine must have a say in the future of Ukraine.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump was also invited to appear on the program, but declined. Now to Florida and the approach of Hurricane Milton.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided.
I can say without any dramatization whatsoever, if you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you're going to die.
That is the mayor of Tampa, Florida, Jane Castor. Hurricane Milton is still out in the Gulf of Mexico, but is expected to make land in the Tampa-St. Petersburg area at some point tomorrow. With winds at 250 kilometers an hour, torrential rain, and a dangerous storm surge, millions of people along the state's Gulf Coast are being told to evacuate their communities. The storm's on a slightly different path than Hurricane Helene, which devastated a wide area of the state last month, but with literally tons of debris left behind, there are fears an already devastating storm has the potential to be even more deadly. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A Canadian is the co-winner of this year's Nobel Prize in Physics.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics to John Hopfield, Princeton University, USA, and Geoffrey Hinton, University of Toronto, Canada.
The Secretary General of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences making that announcement. Geoffrey Hinton is a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto. He is the 4th Nobel winner in that school's history. The Nobel Committee says Hinton and Princeton's John Hopfield are being honored for their discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning through the use of artificial neural networks. The Nobel Prizes are being handed out all this week, with the Peace Prize being awarded on Friday. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
You're listening to Information Radio here, 6:35 right now. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in this morning for Marcy Marcusa. Abby Adiemi, what is going on with the weather?
We're looking at a beautiful day with plenty of sunshine. That's the forecast for both the north and the southern parts of the province this morning. Winnipeg currently 5 degrees. It's clear outside. We'll see a sunny day today with the highs close to 19. Some of the regions we're seeing 20. We have this light southeast breeze in the forecast this afternoon. But for tonight, we just cool down to 7 degrees and more clear skies for tonight. Brandon sitting at 3 degrees at this time, also clear out there. Today's forecast calls for mainly sunny conditions with breezy afternoon, highs around 22. And then for tonight, you cool down to 2 degrees. Moving north to Thompson, where it is currently 2 degrees with lingering mist out there. Some foggy conditions you'll be feeling as you start your day for folks up there. Today will be mainly cloudy with this fog patches clearing as you get into the morning. The forecasted high is around 10 degrees. And as we move further north to Churchill, where it's 1 degree, also cloudy out there. Today we'll see a mix of sun and clouds and some fog also being felt this morning, but that should clear as you get into the morning. We'll see a high of 5 there. Dauphin is sitting at 3 degrees and we'll be seeing mainly sunny conditions today. We'll see the highs around 20, and then for tonight it cools down for folks there to 2 degrees. Gimli currently at -1, partly cloudy. For the Interlake region, we should see sunny conditions later today. A breezy afternoon. The high would only get to 18 degrees, and then for tonight you see some clear skies and you cool off to 6. Steinbach at 5, heading to a high of 20, and for Morris it's at 7 degrees at this time. It is clear out there. For the Pembina Valley region, we should be seeing sunny skies, light breeze, and highs around 19 degrees. So we're just in for another sunny and warm day. Lots of sunshine in the forecast from north all the way down to south, and it's going to be a bit breezy out there, not too chilly. Right now 5 degrees, and we're heading to a high of 19 for Winnipeg.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Doesn't feel like October. It's wild.
I know, right?
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at your commute right now. Not so hot out there in terms of any major issues going on, but if you see something, give us a call on the CBC commuter line. Marcy Marcusa is standing by to take your call. That number 204-788-3093. No, you're not living an alternative timeline. Marcy Marcusa is behind the glass today, resting her voice, and I'm sitting in for just for today. Well, next up on the show, Neil Kumar joins us now with the Business Report. Hello there.
Hi, good morning.
So Quebec's pension fund says it's ready to back Couche-Tard in its quest for the 7-Eleven chain.
Yes, according to a senior executive at Quebec's public pension manager, the fund is expected to provide financial backing to Alimentation Couche-Tard if it moves ahead with the takeover bid for 7 & I Holdings, which is the parent company of 7-Eleven. Couche-Tard made an approach to 7 & I that valued it at about $39 billion. However, the Japanese retailer turned it down, stating that the proposal wasn't good enough to engage in substantive discussions. According to a report, Couche-Tard is considering upgrading its offer, but has not made any movement on that front so far. In the meantime, according to people familiar with the matter, 7 & I has approached potential buyers for its Ito Yokota stores and supermarkets as it looks to restructure. CDPQ is one of Couche-Tard's largest shareholders, and the stock is one of its most important holdings, with a 3.5% stake in the company, which is worth $2.4 billion. It is reported that a Couche-Tard takeover of 7 & I would be the largest ever foreign takeover of a Japanese company. According to Raymond James analyst Bobby Griffin, the Japanese government's openness to foreign direct investment might have impacted the timing of Couche-Tard's approach, which may have pushed them to look a little bit harder. Couche-Tard and its founder, executive chairman Alain Bouchard, have made a number of approaches to 7 & I for deals over the past 2 decades.
Now, an antitrust case against Amazon is set to move forward in the U.S. What more do we know about that?
That's right. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission's case is accusing the internet giant of using anti-competitive tactics to stifle competition in online retail, Although the case will move forward, court documents show that some of the states that sued alongside the agency had their claims dismissed. U.S. District Judge John Chun in Seattle unsealed his ruling from September 30th, which dismissed some of the claims brought by attorney generals in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Oklahoma. In 2023, the FTC alleged that Amazon was using an algorithm that boosted prices for households in the U.S. that saw them pay more than $1 billion. Amazon has stated in its court papers that it stopped using the program in 2019. However, even though the FTC says the online retailer is using anti-competitive tactics to maintain dominance among online superstores and marketplaces, Amazon had asked Judge Chun to dismiss the case last December, saying there was no evidence of harm to customers. Chun said in his ruling that he cannot consider Amazon's claims that its actions benefited competition at this early stage in the case.
And finally here, according to a new survey, the U.S. may have hit peak obesity. What more are we learning about that?
Yes, so with the introduction of weight loss drugs, it appears a decades-long rise in obesity may have been reversed in a few short years south of the border. According to new data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, the U.S. adult obesity rate stopped its long climb and dropped by roughly 2 percentage points between 2020 and 2023. Given the public health milestone, there is no direct evidence that links the fall in U.S. obesity rates with the proliferation of weight loss drugs such as Wegovy, Zepbound, and others. However, the Financial Times deems it highly likely that they played a major role, with 1 out of 8 American adults having used these drugs, which can result in a total body weight loss of 3 to 12%. According to The Independent, the usage of these medications took off in 2021 in the same period when the drop was reported.
What's happening in the market so far this morning?
Yeah, so in Europe, markets open lower as they retreat from China's stimulus rally. Germany, France, and the UK are all down. In Asia, China's rally has lost steam as authorities disappoint markets. Japan is down, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is down. Oil is down $1.43 to $75.71 U.S. per barrel. Gold is down $1.80 to $2,670 U.S. per ounce. And the Canadian dollar is down 0.07 of a cent to 73.4 cents U.S.
Thank you very much, Neil.
All right, thank you.
That's Neil Kumar with our CBC Business Report. Time right now, 6:41. We got time for a bit of music. Brandon Roots musician Mitchell Mcons is up for a handful of awards at the 2024 Manitoba Country Music Awards. Categories he's in the running for include Roots Artist of the Year as well as Album of the Year. Mitchell's music reflects actually his Ojibwe heritage, and his stage name Mcons means little bear in Anishinaabe-Moan. Here's Mitchell Mcons with Courage.
Sing, all I can think about is money. If I'm gonna make it, if I should even try to find my way, navigate the water, time is in question, I need help. Creator, give me courage, cause I'm scared as hell. Everything keeps changing, I'm unsure of myself. Don't know where I'm going, but I know just what to find. Looking for a little piece of mind. As the moonlight rises on disappearing days, I wonder if the red road will let me take a break from these chains. I'm too young to be helpless, scared of being selfish and treating you that way. Creator, give me courage, cause I'm scared as hell. Everything keeps changing, I'm unsure of myself. Don't know where I'm going, but I know just what to find. Looking for a little piece of mind. Creator, give me courage. I'm scared as hell. Everything keeps changing, I'm unsure of myself. Don't know where I'm going, but I know just what to find. Looking for a little piece of mind. A little piece of mind. A little piece of mind.
That's Brandon's Mitchell Mcons with Courage. And you can hear him and you got a number of country artists who will probably be playing November 10th this year at the Manitoba Country Music Awards. They're going to be held at the Club Region Casino and Event Center. Well, still to come this morning, we're following some breaking news. Our control room actually just reached out to a chronic care patient at Deer Lodge who relies on home care, and she says that she is relieved this morning upon hearing the news that the healthcare support worker strike has been averted. Aides there are already talking about it, she says. So we're going to have more details on that coming up in the news. So there is a tentative deal between QP and MGEU and Shared Health, keeping 25,000 members from hitting the picket lines this morning. Well, next up on the show, the federal government is making changes to mortgages. It's resurrecting the classic 30-year mortgage, so a longer term with lower monthly payments. But some experts say a better way to make home ownership more affordable would be to do something about the stress test. CBC's Danielle Neerman takes a closer look.
I know that I'm a real estate agent and I want people to get in the housing market and I really want them to get a home. But sometimes I have to kind of step back and go, but at what cost?
Develle Morrison says there's no way around it. A home that takes 30 years to pay off instead of 25 will cost you more.
Yes, it's going to bring your mortgage payments down, which is great. But then when you think about how much interest you're paying over the long term, you realize it's the bank that's getting rich.
And we're not talking small change. An extra 5 years of interest payments could cost tens of thousands of dollars.
The banks are popping their champagne. You know, I posted about this on my social media, and literally somebody said to me, yeah, I just doubled down my stocks on the banks.
If we really want to do something for consumers, Develle says we should be looking at the stress test. The mortgage stress test was designed by Canada's bank regulator back in 2016.
New rules went into effect today that could make it harder for some to buy a new home.
It was meant to keep home buyers from getting in over their heads, protect us from a US-style housing crash, and cool off an overheated housing market. So here's how it works. If you want to get a mortgage, you need to prove you can make payments on an interest rate of 5.25% or 2% more than the rate you get offered by the bank, whichever is higher. But Will Dunning says the bar was set too high.
Stress test is being too onerous.
Will is an independent housing market economist in Toronto. He says the stress test has had unintended consequences. People unable to qualify for mortgages have stayed in the tight rental market. And Will also thinks
If people can't buy homes and they can't buy newly built homes, then builders will construct fewer of them because they can't sell as many.
And unless you've been living under a rock, you know Canada doesn't have enough housing.
And so it's a stress test over a very long period of time has made the housing affordability situation actually worse than it should have been.
Now, Will isn't saying we should axe the stress test, but maybe it's more stressful than it needs to be. Most Canadians are keeping up with their payments. Mortgage arrears are at the lowest levels in decades, even with these higher interest rates.
But guess what? People can still afford to make their payments. Why? It's because they have more income, because their incomes have grown.
This November, changes are coming. anyone renewing their mortgage with a different bank won't have to pass the stress test again. But right now, wages are going up faster than inflation, and falling interest rates are making home ownership more affordable. For Deval Morrison, the Toronto real estate broker, those are signs that it's time to say bye-bye to the stress test.
It's over. It's really time to move on and maybe, I was about to say come up with something else, but no, please don't come up with something else.
For CBC Radio, I'm Danielle Nerman.
Well, for more stories about money and economic forces that are all around us, you can subscribe to CBC's Cost of Living podcast, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. You can also catch the show on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. and Saturday at noon right here on CBC Radio 1. Well, 6:50 right now, 5 degrees at the Forks, heading for a high today of sunny 19 here in Winnipeg. Well, stalled. That's how many political watchers have been describing the House of Commons lately, and the outlook for this week looks about the same. The holdup is debate over the Conservative point of privilege, and for her take on all this, we're joined by Sarah Ritchie, Ottawa News editor for the Canadian Press. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what more can you tell us about this point of privilege and the documents of the Green Technology Fund that the Conservatives want to release? There's a lot of parliamentary jibber-jabber there.
Yeah, there is. So this all relates to a fund called Sustainable Development Technology Canada. It's something that the Conservatives have more catchily coined the Green Slush Fund. This was created as an arm's-length foundation back in 2001, and the aim was to dole out government money to encourage green technology development in the country. So back in 2021, this fund got a $1 billion deal from the federal government to do just that. But the questions about how it was spending its money have gone back a little ways as well. Last fall, MPs on one of the House committees were questioning the board of directors chair because she had been involved in the approval of over $200,000 in funding to her own company. As you can imagine, that didn't go over very well. She was no longer the board chair quite quickly after that. There was an ethics commissioner investigation and then an auditor general report into all of this. That happened over the summer. The auditor found that the fund had actually violated its own conflict of interest policies about 90 times and awarded millions of dollars to ineligible projects, and that overall some of the projects that it was funding were not meeting its own targets. So the government has axed the funding, but MPs on the opposition benches want more information about how this misspending was happening and what was going on with the fund. So they had actually asked for a whole trove of documents from the government about the management of the fund. And what they got back was redacted documents. So what they've now demanded through Parliament, through a vote in Parliament, is an unredacted copy of these documents, which the Conservatives say they want to be able to hand over to the police to do their own investigation. So far, the Liberals are saying that's not how we do business. We're not going to give documents to you to give to the police. That's not proper use of parliamentary powers. And so they're not handing over the documents.
So then what is like the RCMP saying about this?
So the RCMP say they're actually investigating this already and separately from the investigation that's ongoing within the House of Commons. They say they already have copies of the documents that the government handed over, these redacted ones. But when it comes to the unredacted set of documents, the RCMP has cautioned that it's also not proper for them to receive documents related to an investigation from a third party like Parliament, for example. So it just probably legally speaking, they wouldn't be able to use them in the investigation, and that they have their own ways of going about getting information that they need. But the Tories are saying, no, we think you need to see the documents and see what's in it in order to make that determination. So that's sort of where the stalemate has built up.
So how much is this, this stalemate interfering with House business?
So because it's a point of privilege, the way that the House of Commons works, a point of privilege takes precedent over anything else. And so nothing else can happen in terms of government business or opposition business until this thing is resolved. And that's why we've seen more than 7 days of solid debate on this. So question period still happens every day, and members are able to give their member statements, but then it turns right back to the debate and picks up where it left off. And the way that this works is the debate continues to go until all members, have had their say. So as long as opposition members keep rising on their feet and calling for this debate to continue and doing their debate, it's going to continue on, and the government can't get back to its own agenda, which means any bills that it wants to pass. So there are a few things on the docket, a bill that would reform the military justice system, and one related to clean water for First Nations, the online harms legislation. All of that has to wait. They can't even schedule, actually, an opposition day motion. So the Conservatives have said they want to put forward another non-confidence motion to try to bring down the government over all of this. But interestingly, the opposition day that they are owed can't be scheduled until this point of privilege has been debated.
So Karina Gould, the Liberal House Leader, says this is simply the Conservatives trying to, quote, muck up Parliament, unquote. So what do you make of that statement from the House Leader?
Well, listen, the Conservatives have been pretty clear throughout all of this. If the Liberals want this debate to end and they want to get back to the business that they were intending to do this fall, all they have to do is hand over the documents to Parliament. It's not just the Conservatives who are taking part in this. The other opposition parties are part of the debate as well. And I'll just point out that last Friday, Green Party leader Elizabeth May, offered her 2 cents as part of the debate. And she did at one point sort of say, I hope you guys have heard enough. I hope we can get back to the business that we're supposed to be here doing. But one thing that she said that's a little bit more nuanced than what the Tories are saying, I think, is that she said Parliament voted in favor of asking the government for these documents. All of Parliament has requested the documents. And because that happened, she said Parliament has a right to see what the documents say. So she's just calling for the government to hand over the documents as well. Ultimately, this is going to, depend on how long the Conservatives and the other members of the opposition ranks want to continue this debate.
So any end in sight there is can you give us a timeline and how long you might expect it to last, or no?
I wish I could. No, I can't give you a timeline. It's really difficult to say, right? The Liberals have a couple of tools in their toolkit. If they wanted to, as the government, they could put forward a motion that would curtail the debate or give a time limit on it and put an end to this. But because it's a minority parliament, they would need one of the opposition parties to vote with them on that. And I don't think anybody is really keen to do that at this point. So they seem to be just letting this play out. One of the things Karina Gould said to us last week is, hey, sometimes these things happen. Points of privilege get debated and the debate drags out, sometimes for a couple days, sometimes a couple weeks. Eventually we'll get back to doing what we're here to do. So it doesn't seem like they're keen to actually put an end to the debate. It's not really clear, though, what will happen with all of this because, this is a minority parliament. There are going to be non-confidence votes to come down the line. And one of the things that the NDP House Leader, Peter Julian, said to us last week is the longer this dysfunction goes on, the more we sort of have to consider that in how we vote on a confidence motion. So it becomes an open question whether the opposition parties are willing to let this kind of dysfunction continue. And I suggest to you that that's probably one of the reasons that the Conservatives are willing to let it go on, is just to show that Parliament isn't getting anything done under this minority government at this point.
Sarah, thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Sarah Ritchie is Ottawa news editor for the Canadian Press. Well, time to chat with Heather Wells here, who's been having a look at the news that broke just this past hour. Hello.
Good morning. Yeah, talk about taking it right down to the wire. There will be no strike. A strike has been averted, postponed, whichever language you like, by 25,000 healthcare support staff in Manitoba. They were to hit the picket lines later this morning. The strike deadline was 6 a.m. And CUPE spokesperson Dale Edmonds tells us they reached a tentative deal at 4:25 this morning. He calls that deal substantial and says the union is recommending acceptance. So we'll hear more details this morning. And hundreds turned out last night for a vigil to remember victims of the October 7th attack on Israel. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells at our CBC News Desk. I'm Corey Funk sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. And stay tuned. Still lots to come here on Radio Noon. Still ahead. A Holocaust survivor says to her children, I feel so bad for you. I'm sorry that you have to go through this. We thought It was over and now it's happening again. That was 1 year ago. Our coverage of how Manitoba families have been affected by the war in the Middle East continues this coming hour. Also coming up right here on Information Radio. World Report is coming up next.
On The Current.
The world's richest fashion junkies recently flocked to Paris for Haute Couture Week.
For decades, Jeannie Becker has known anyone who's anyone in the world of fashion. She's interviewed them all, and she now tells her life story through a series of garments that have shaped who she is. Jeannie Becker, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Big news in the world of science. A Canadian has been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics to John Hopfield, Princeton University, USA, and Geoffrey Hinton, University of Toronto, Canada, for foundational discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks.
Geoffrey Hinton is known as the godfather of artificial intelligence. He told CBC News Network he hopes the Nobel will give him a bigger platform to share his concerns about AI.
Fairly soon, probably within the next 20 years, we're going to develop things more intelligent than us, and we've never been there before. We have no idea what it's going to be like, and we should be working hard now on how to make sure it doesn't take control away from people.
The award comes with a prize of $1.4 million Canadian, which is shared between the two winners. People in Tampa, Florida are being told to get out or they will die. The city's mayor says Hurricane Milton will be deadly. It has been downgraded to Category 4, but Milton is still strong and moving quickly in the Gulf of Mexico. Hundreds of thousands of people are under evacuation orders. Jennifer Glass has the latest from Jacksonville, Florida.
Floridians are lining up to fill sandbags ahead of Hurricane Milton. Mexicans on the Yucatan Peninsula will be waking up Tuesday to its effects. The storm is expected across central Florida Wednesday evening. Governor Ron DeSantis.
Milton has strengthened not just into a major hurricane, but a Category 5 hurricane, and not just a Category 5 hurricane, but a very strong 175 mile per hour sustained wind Category 5 hurricane.
That's about 280 kilometers an hour. 51 of Florida's 67 counties are under a state of emergency. The highways out of Tampa on Florida's west coast are jammed with people evacuating. That's where Milton is expected to make landfall on Wednesday. Marissa Parra is a reporter for NBC News.
I'm seeing a lot of people who are taking this more seriously than they've ever taken any hurricane in their life. I have been covering hurricanes in Tampa at NBC for a few years now, and I've never seen people taking it this seriously.
That may be because less than 2 weeks ago, Hurricane Helene devastated Florida's Gulf Coast. Hitting 167 kilometers north of Tampa, it killed more than 230 people across 6 states, caused billions in damage, and left behind debris that workers are now scrambling to remove before Milton's high winds turn it into projectiles. It's still unclear exactly where Milton will hit, and millions of Floridians are watching its path carefully as they weigh whether to leave or to stay. Jennifer Glass for CBC News, Jacksonville, Florida.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is on a media blitz. She's appearing on talk shows, podcasts, daytime television, and last night, a one-on-one interview with 60 Minutes. Harris was asked about the war in Ukraine and the crisis at the United States southern border. During her sit-down with CBS's Bill Whitaker, Harris was also pressed on her economic policy, specifically how she plans to get it through Congress if she is elected president.
There are plenty of leaders in Congress who understand and know that the Trump tax cuts blew up our federal deficit. None of us, and certainly I cannot afford to be myopic in terms of how I think about strengthening America's economy.
Republican candidate Donald Trump had initially agreed to also sit down with 60 Minutes, but canceled. Americans head to the polls in 28 days. Israel says it is expanding its ground invasion into southwestern Lebanon, and it's claiming to have made progress in its war against Hezbollah. This morning, the IDF says it has killed another Hezbollah leader, further weakening the Iranian-backed militia. Crystal Gomansing reports from Jerusalem.
Israel Defense Forces say it killed the man responsible for managing weapons logistics between Iran and Hezbollah. Suhail Hassan Hassani was killed in Beirut. Lebanese capital and the suburbs have come under heavy bombardment in recent days. The IDF did not say when the commander was killed, just that it was a precise intelligence-based strike on a Hezbollah headquarters, which it says also manufactured precision-guided missiles. Several Hezbollah leaders have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on Lebanon, most notably the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Still, the group, declared a terror organization by the Canadian government, continues to target its neighbor. Rocket warning sirens rang out across central and northern Israel overnight into the morning. Hezbollah says it targeted Israeli troops gathering near its border. Israel is expanding the area of its ground invasion, moving into southern Lebanon, using reserve troops for the first time. Danny Danon is the Israeli ambassador to the UN. He highlighted his nation's strength as the world marked the anniversary of the October 7th attacks.
The Jewish people have a strong state, a powerful military, and the courage to protect ourselves.
How and when Israel will strike back against Iran remains a key question. It was 1 week ago that Iran sent a barrage of missiles towards Israel. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, Jerusalem.
This morning, the Prime Minister is departing on his first official visit to Laos. He is going there to advance political and trade ties with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And as Olivia Stefanovich reports, he has some work to do restoring Canada's reputation.
And I believe that we can bring back peace and security to the Middle East.
That's the goal, according to Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly. But Canada's record is expected to be challenged when the Prime Minister arrives in Vientiane, the capital of Laos, for meetings with regional leaders this week.
And the claim is that essentially we care more about the suffering in Ukraine because it's in Europe than we do when it's suffering in Africa or the Middle East or elsewhere.
Even though Southeast Asia seems far from the fighting, Veena Najibullah says the conflict in the Middle East hits close to home. She's with the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada.
Particularly Muslim-majority countries like Indonesia, Malaysia. We've taken a reputational hit in the last couple of years, largely because of the situation in the Middle East, in Gaza.
Najibullah says the same charge is levied against all Western countries, but it's one the Prime Minister will have to navigate carefully as he tries to secure free trade deals in the region. Roland Paris is Justin Trudeau's former foreign policy advisor.
So the presence of the Prime Minister is an on-the-ground demonstration of Canada's seriousness about building relationships.
After Laos, Trudeau's attention will indeed return to Ukraine. For a defense meeting he will attend in Germany later in the week, alongside leaders like Joe Biden and Volodymyr Zelensky, to name a few. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
In India, 2 state elections are being seen as a test of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's power. Modi is expected to hold on to Haryana, but not so in Muslim-majority Kashmir. It is the first local election in that state since it lost its semi-autonomy 5 years ago. Our South Asia correspondent Salima Shivji has details.
On the last day of voting in Kashmir, there was relief among some that they were even going to the polls. It's been 10 years without any regional elections here, this voter says, and they were extremely difficult years. We need elected officials who want to help the people. It's the first legislative election in Jammu and Kashmir since India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi stripped the Muslim-majority region of its special status 5 years ago, downgrading it from a state with significant regional autonomy to a territory controlled directly by New Delhi. And in this vote, turnout was high in an area where separatist sentiment has often provoked election boycotts.
So people wanted to make a point. And
says political scientist Noor Ahmed Baba, against the loss of the area's semi-autonomy. The alliance made up of a regional party and India's main opposition party, the Congress, is poised to form government. But the assembly won't have much power without New Delhi's input.
The former state, which was one of the most powerful states, has been completely disempowered and reduced to the status of a municipality.
Still, the fact that 3 voting phases were peaceful in Kashmir is a win for Modi's party in a public relations battle, bolstering their view that direct rule has brought peace to a historically restive region. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on YouTube. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in this morning for Marcy Marcusa. 5 degrees right now in Winnipeg, hitting for a high today of 19. More to come in your weather, but also this hour on the show, we're going to be talking about wheelchair accessibility. Turns out, wheelchair accessible, that sign you see, across lots of Manitoba, it's not as accessible as you think. Also this hour, what is a hackathon and how is it helping Manitobans better understand reconciliation? That conversation coming up after 7:30. But this half hour on the show, yesterday in our city, there was a local gathering to remember the victims of October 7th, and also another to draw attention to the loss of life in Gaza. How do we move forward here in Manitoba together? Our series of one-on-one conversations continues this hour on the show. 7:11 right now, and covering a breaking news story today is Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Yes, well, they talked right through the night, and less than 2 hours before this morning's strike deadline, they reached a tentative deal. A strike that would have happened this morning by 25,000 healthcare support staff in Manitoba has been averted. The workers, who are members of CUPE and MGEU, are being told this morning the strike is postponed. Dale Edmonds at CUPE calls it a substantial deal and says the union is recommending acceptance. So we'll hear more details on exactly what went on and what's going to happen today with those healthcare support workers. What will they be doing? We'll hear that coming up as well. A former high school football coach convicted of sexually abusing players was sentenced yesterday to 20 years in prison. Kelsey McClay pleaded guilty last year to multiple counts of sexual assault in luring. He coached the Churchill Bulldogs and Vincent Massey Trojans. We're going to hear more about what the judge had to say in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi is in with a look at the beautiful July-esque weather on this October morning.
Look at the skyline on YouTube, Corey. It is beautiful. We're seeing that golden hour already in the city happening. That's the sign of what we'll be seeing today. Lots of sunshine in the forecast. We're going to see the highs, as mentioned, from 5 in Churchill to 22, 23 for Steinbach and Brandon. Right now, 4 degrees in the city. We're seeing the clear sky, the sun making its appearance already. It's going to be a sunny day. It's going to be clear outside. We're going to have this light southeast breeze picking up later sometime this afternoon. And we're aiming for a high of 19 today. And then this clear sky we start the day with will stay with us through the evening, and then the winds will become light. We dip down to about 7 degrees later. In other regions, currently still cloudy in the northern part, though we'll see a mix of sun and clouds later. Thompson getting some misty conditions at this time at 2, and Churchill is just kind of clear at -1. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at 4 degrees.
Abby, you're a space guy, right?
Yes, I am.
Fun space fact. Last night, Earth went through a wormhole, and the only change to the timeline was that Marcy and I switched jobs, and Marcy got a really sore throat.
I guessed as much. It's the alternate reality happening in front of me.
Classic sci-fi moment.
Wow, is that what happened?
Yeah. The wormhole.
Yeah. I think I'm just trying to preserve a voice that's getting craggy myself, but I'll take it. In this other life, do I have other benefits? Like, can I fly and do other kinds of cool stuff?
No, you're more techie.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. And you're really good at cooking.
All right. I might have hung up on the Gus this morning. I am directing this morning. My throat's a little raw, but let me just tell you what's going on in traffic. Two things are developing here. Southbound King Edward past Dublin. There's a stall blocking the southbound curb lane. Please stay left to pass there. Also, Cumberland Avenue, there's a closure. Cumberland Avenue, closure of all eastbound lanes of Cumberland between Hargrave and Donald. They're closed for water work. This is going to extend until October the 11th. Please call us, though, on the traffic line, and I'll pick it up if you have anything else to pass along on this Tuesday morning. 788-3093.
Well, next on the show this week on Information Radio, we're listening to different perspectives from Manitobans who've had their lives changed in the past year since October 7th and the resulting war in the Middle East. And our next guest, Kinsey Posen, he is a Jewish Winnipegger who has family members who are Holocaust survivors. And before he attended last night's gathering at the Asper Jewish Community Center in Winnipeg, he was here in our studio. And for full disclosure, Kinsey also worked at CBC Manitoba for many years as a producer back in the day. And Marcy Marcusa asked him how his life has changed in the past year.
I would say that your life can't be the same, not after an event of such proportions, because it affects all of us. There's a whole thing in the Jewish community about us all being together, that we're, in a sense, responsible for each other, and that we're one people. So when something like that happens, it just can't help but affect you. It's deep pain, deep shock. And to think what the people are going through, and to this day, here we are a year later, there's still a little over 100 hostages still in captivity, when now the war has expanded, several fronts. It's something we always think about. We're always talking about it. It never leaves our brains. It's there all the time. And one thing that happened is my mother-in-law, who's a Holocaust survivor, Rochelle, who's gone through the war with the Nazis, and she said to us, to my wife and I feel so bad for you. I'm so sorry that you have to go through this, which we went through before, and now we thought it was over, and now it's happening again. So things like that, it goes very deep in many ways.
How is she? I won't ask you to speak for her so directly, but how is she, and how are you doing with that fact, the never again and yet again?
Yeah, well, it's something we're always talking about. My mother-in-law's, excuse me, is obsessed with the news. She watches it quite a bit every day, and she sees what's going on, and she just, in some ways, she doesn't almost see a way out of it. So we talk about it all the time. It's something that's always truly on our minds, and I feel for her. I feel for everybody.
How has it impacted your life as a Manitoban and in your relationships in Manitoba?
Well, it's more about how it's affected me as a human being, really, more than anything. Sure, we're here in Manitoba. We've got our different communities, and our communities are together. In one way, it's inspiring because we have rallies once a week where all we do is just make our presence known and keep it in the news for people. And you'd be amazed at how much positivity comes out of that. People honking their horns, giving us the thumbs up sign. We also get the other signs, but just to see that support, and to see that support from other Manitobans, in this case, from a lot of Christian groups come to support us. There have been people from the Yazidi community, and there have been people from the Iranian community who support Israel and who we are as Jews and so on. So it's good to see.
There are groups now that are growing, and new groups that are growing right now, and some of them are bringing, Palestinian Winnipeggers and Jewish Winnipeggers together to build bridges. How possible is it for us in Manitoba to move forward as this continues to escalate on that front? Because there's also been people, and I shared this on the air this morning, that there are people that understand the challenge of what we're talking about here, don't want to see the media engage in what they've termed both sidism. And also some people that just frankly are afraid to go on from all sides. There's been people threatened on all sides, I think. What are your thoughts on that moving forward in this province?
Well, first of all, I would say, Marcy, that I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of deep hope, and I see light at the end of this tunnel as opposed to more darkness. There were groups before where Muslims and Jews were working together, and they were very successful. And only since October 7th have we seen this other onslaught of negativity and almost violent thoughts and people talking about things that they would normally never talk about. We didn't see that before, not really. So that brings a whole different dynamic to the situation. And again, since I have hope, I believe that there are people we can still talk to. You can't talk to everybody. Not everybody wants to listen. You can't change their minds. I would just say one thing that comes out of all of this. I just wish people would educate, like regular Manitobans. I just wish they would educate themselves more about this whole situation. If you're just looking at the headlines that you might see in the media or little film clips, this and that, you're going to get a biased picture of what's really going on. If you take the time, if you have that luxury of being able to educate yourself to see what the narratives really are, what the truth is, what has happened after all this time, I think it can open some doors to more hope and peace in that way.
Anything you want to add, Kinsey? I know you were preparing to come in today and speak about your personal perspective on this as part of our series. Anything you want to add I haven't asked you about?
No, I just hope, when I say that there's hope, when I say there's hope for myself and for all the people involved here, I really think that there could be a positive outcome. And I want to believe in that, and I want to support that, and I want to tell people that if we can see ourselves through this hard period right now. Again, I just want to say, think about both sides. Think about what people are going through. Think about what the Jewish people, it's an old thing for us. We've been doing it, unfortunately, for thousands of years. So it's just be kind. Educate yourself, be kind, be aware, think of the other person. I think we can make that change somehow. I just want to be positive about it, despite all the negativity that's happening all over.
Thank you so much for being part of our series and one of the voices with your perspective today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
That was Kinsey Posen in conversation with Marcy Marcusa yesterday on the October 7th anniversary. He's a Jewish Winnipegger who has family members who are Holocaust survivors, and still ahead as our Perspective series continues.
We lost over 97 members of my family since October 7th. Myself, I was hospitalized for a heart condition in March 5th of this year, and again in August. As much as we say we want to live for our family and our children, it's unfortunately affects everybody who calls himself a human, especially if you're very closely related to that part of the world.
A Palestinian Manitoban adds his voice to our series. That's coming up after 8.
When the WWF took on the WWE, the Panda pinned the wrestler. When a storm slammed the stereo store, a best place to buy was born. And then Smokey Philip Morris butted out his name. Tornadoes and lawsuits, why companies changed their names, on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly, Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
7:22 right now, and it's been 7 years since we've had a full-length album from Nelly Furtado, and now the Grammy and Juno winner has unveiled her 7th studio album, appropriately called 7. It sees her reuniting with old collaborators like Timbaland from Promiscuous Girl, but also with her next generation of Canadian R&B artists like Charlotte Day Wilson. Here they are now with a duet called All Comes Back. You're hearing it right here on CBC Radio 1.
It's funny how we stand in the fire, thinking that we won't get burned. Can't say no to desire, even when we know we'll get hurt. Started with reluctance, I landed right in your lap. Then I tried to forget all of the warmth in your hands. Everything's disrupted, can't remember like we got a lesson to learn, and we don't think we deserve it. When happiness is served, started with reluctance, I landed right in your lap. Then I tried to forget all of the warmth in your hands. Now everything's disrupted, can't remember the last time I laughed. I had that. It all comes back. It all comes back. It all comes back. It all comes back, back. If I leave you now and walk away, I'll be okay. But I'm human and I wanna ride out the whole thing. Tell me what's the point of choosing anyway, choosing to go or stay. It all comes back.
That's Nelly Furtado featuring Charlotte Day Wilson with All Comes Back. Her new album is called 7:25 right now here on CBC Radio when you're listening to Information Radio. I'm Corey Funk in for Marcy Marcusa. Quick traffic note here. Southbound King Edward past Dublin, there's a stall in the southbound curb lane, so keep left to get around that. You can call our commuter line if you have any other issues. Marcy is standing by to take your calls. We've switched roles today. That number to call, 204-788-3093. Well, it is time for sports with Scott Regehr. Good morning.
Hey there, Corey.
So I love me a good underdog story, and It seems like Major League Baseball is the playoffs are the place to be for that.
Yeah, underdogs Detroit and Kansas City registered big wins last night, Corey. They both relied on ace pitchers to do so. The Royals' Cole Reagans, who spent his afternoon apparently in Central Park just playing catch with people, went 4 strong innings in his team's win over the Yankees, while Detroit's Cy Young Award candidate Tarek Skubal, he didn't allow a run in their victory over the Guardians. He strutted off the mound in the 6th inning in Cleveland, Corey, throwing his hands up in the air as if to ask the crowd, "Are you not entertained?"
Amazing.
Although those weren't his exact words.
Yeah, I don't really know where I was at mentally in those situations, but I probably shouldn't say some bad words with some cameras on me with kids watching, but it was just emotion, raw emotion, and the environment here, first off, was great. I think Cleveland fans, this environment, it was incredible to play in, hostile, all that stuff that as a kid you dream of playing and pitching in front of. So, yeah, it was kind of both those things, I guess.
Tarek Skubal, all of the division series, all 4 of them, are tied up at a game apiece right now.
Amazing. So it'll also be a big night in basketball, too, where we'll find out who will play in the WNBA finals.
We will. We already knew New York was involved after they ousted the defending champs from Las Vegas on Sunday. And this evening, Corey, it'll be either the Minnesota Lynx or Connecticut Sun who join them. Veteran Connecticut forward Dewana Bonner is keeping the pressure of this do-or-die contest in perspective.
It's an elimination game, but at the end of that buzzer, we're going to win or lose. So no reason to panic or freak out. You got to stay within yourself. I feel like when you start freaking out before the game, it psychs you out. But at the end of the day, it's basketball. And at the end of that, we go on with our lives. So that's just my mindset. I don't know about the young ones, but that's just me.
That is a proper life view there from the Connecticut player. And Canada, the Canadian women's basketball team has let go of its coach and will be looking for another one in his stead. So some other basketball news developing right now.
And last but not least here, Scott, hockey, of course, where the NHL teams south of the border are dealing with different concerns to start the regular season.
And some more concerning than others, Corey. With Category 5 Hurricane Milton expected to make landfall in Tampa tomorrow, the Lightning evacuated their community last night. They've moved to North Carolina, where they will play their first regular season game on Friday. Tampa forward Nick Paul, who was with the team in 2022 when it had to evacuate during Hurricane Ian, is leaning on that experience.
A couple of us have been through it before, and we went to Nashville, was it 2 years ago? So we've been through it. We kind of
I wouldn't say calm about it, but we definitely have more confidence about it. You know, what to do with the pets, what's going on in highway situations and stuff like that. So, yeah, I just a lot of experience in this room. And, you know, if you're a little panicky or anxious or kind of figuring out what to do, you know, there's a lot of guys here to talk to and calm down and send information back to the little guys at home.
Pretty tough to focus on power play schemes and neutral zone breakouts, Corey, when you just fear for the safety of your loved ones. Tampa's home opener goes Saturday against, yes, the Hurricanes, and it looks like it could be in jeopardy at this point. One other note, Utah, the Utah Hockey Club, which is their name for now, have their first ever game tonight at home to Chicago. Their chefs in the arena are featuring cuisine from visiting team cities' cuisine. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Chicago hot dogs tonight.
Ooh.
Yeah, celery, salt, and the whole bit. So when Winnipeg gets there, kielbasa and pierogies.
Oh yeah, or maybe honey dill and chicken fingers. Might be good too. Yeah,
also good.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
You betcha.
That's Scott Reguer with the Sport Report. Still ahead, we are going to be hearing from a group of people who spent 48 hours doing a hackathon that ended up with an app that helps people understand reconciliation. That's coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 4 degrees. It's going to be beautiful. Lots of sunshine in the forecast today. A high of 19. What could have been the largest strike in Manitoba in a century has been averted. 25,000 healthcare support workers represented by CUPE and MGEU were set to walk off the job with a strike deadline of 6 o'clock this morning. But at 4:25 this morning, a tentative deal was reached, taking it right down to the wire. Gina McKay, CUPE president, says today it's back to business as usual.
It's immediate. So, you know, the notice is going out to members today. So all the workers are getting their notice that the strike is postponed. Report for work at your regular shift today. They get back to the clients, back to the people who access services, and return to the work.
McKay would not get into details, but calls the agreement substantial and says it will go a long way to recruit and retain healthcare workers. She says there will be online information sessions and then a vote on this tentative deal. Both MGEU and CUPE are recommending it be accepted. A disgraced former Winnipeg High School football coach has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for sexually abusing 9 players for more than a decade. Judge Raymond Wyant told Kelsey McKay there is no cure for the havoc he wreaked, adding, "Shame on you." Wyant also spoke to the victims, saying from the bottom of his heart what happened to them was not their fault. Kelsey McKay coached the Churchill Bulldogs and the Vincent Massey Trojans. McKay, now 54, was still actively coaching and teaching phys ed at Vincent Massey when he was arrested in 2022. Hundreds of people turned out last night for a vigil to remember the victims of October 7th attacks on Israel. Nearly 1,200 Israelis were killed and 250 more were taken hostage in a Hamas-led attack 1 year ago. The Jewish Federation of Winnipeg organized a walk for Israel at the Asper Jewish Community Campus. Premier Wab Kinew told the group the province is with them.
I want to say the challenging moments of stress, worried about loved ones, the experiences of that terrible tide of anti-Semitism, that we've got your back. And we will continue to support you through this difficult period.
Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham and federal MPs Ben Carr and Marty Morantz also spoke at the vigil. Florida's Gulf Coast is bracing for the impact of Hurricane Milton. It was just downgraded to a Category 4 storm, but still is expected to make landfall tomorrow with strong winds and a dangerous storm surge. Jane Castor is the mayor of Tampa.
I can say without any dramatization whatsoever, if you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you're going to die.
51 of Florida's 67 counties are under states of emergency. A Canadian has won this year's Nobel Prize in Physics.
The 2024 Nobel Prize in Physics to Geoffrey Hinton, University of Toronto, Canada.
The announcement this morning from the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. Geoffrey Hinton is a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto. He is sharing the award with Princeton's John Hopfield. They are being honored for their work in the controversial field of machine learning. Hinton says it has the potential to dramatically improve society, but he says it needs to be controlled.
It's going to be wonderful in many respects. In areas like healthcare, people are going to be able to do the same amount of work with an AI assistant in much less time. It'll mean huge improvements in productivity, but we also have to worry about a number of possible bad consequences, particularly the threat of these things getting out of control.
Geoffrey Hinton spent 10 years at Google working in its AI division, but he left the company later that year, warning about the existential risks of the technology. You can find more Manitoba news on our website. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at our CBC News Desk. I'm Corey Fung, sitting in this morning for Marcy Marcusa, who's still here behind the glass, ready to take your traffic call. She's our studio director this morning. And Abby Adiemi is keeping an eye on the weather out there. He's got your regional forecast.
A sunny day ahead for most of the province. 4 degrees right now in Winnipeg. We will see sunny conditions for the most of the days. A light southwest breeze that will pick up as we get into the afternoon, and then we'd warm up to 19. Up north, we're seeing cloudy conditions, but we're expecting a mix of sun and clouds for Thompson and Churchill. Thompson currently see misty conditions at 2 degrees and Churchill at -1. Thompson will see a high of 10, while Churchill will see a high of 5 degrees. And down south, we're going to see clear skies, sunny conditions. Brandon 4, Dauphin 2, Gimli -1, Steinberg 5, Maurice 7. All will be hovering at close to highs of 22 today. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 4, heading to a high of 19.
Thank you very much, Abby. Taking a look at your commute here. Southbound King Edward, just past Dublin, there's a stall blocking the southbound curb lane, so keep left to get around that, says the Winnipeg Traffic Management Center. Also, for folks, keep in mind, Cumberland Avenue, there's a closure going on. All the eastbound lanes of Cumberland between Hargrave and Donald will be closed for water work until October 11th. So that's just 3 days from now. So please use alternative routes, says the city. So look out for that as well. If you see anything else going on out there, Marcy Marcus is standing by to take your calls. That number 204-788-3093. Well, it's 7:36 right now here on Information Radio. And next on the show, for a group of tech-savvy Winnipeggers, the weekend was spent doing what they do best, coding. It's called the Builders League Hackathons Changing the World. And the only goal, create custom software for an organization that wouldn't have the means to create it. And this year, the hackers set their eyes on Community of Big Hearts. It's a local organization helping Canadians better understand reconciliation. And Selena Starling is the CEO of Community of Big Hearts, as well as Jogo Iwasaki is the co-founder of Origato Creative Solutions Incorporated, the group behind the hackathon. Both join me now in studio. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Good morning.
So, Jogo, I want to start with you. For folks who maybe aren't familiar, can you just tell us what a hackathon is and how it works?
Yeah, so a hackathon is this well-known thing in developer culture where people gather together, usually in one place, and over 48 hours, often a weekend, group up in little teams and build projects together of all sorts of skill levels. This one, though, is very different because it's only one big project with over 50 people together, which is kind of crazy. It was like a mini company in a weekend.
Do any of you sleep?
I mean, certainly some of us slept, but there were also people up until 3 a.m. coding away. Yeah, and then even after the weekend, they were still going.
Really?
Yep, on Monday. I was checking this morning. There was still people adding in more stuff.
What's your strategy? Is it like coffee? What's the move?
We try to make this as healthy as we could in this kind of context. So we try not to overly encourage the coffee, but obviously people were going to have coffee. They wouldn't be
pure motivation to do good things. That's what keeps you going.
I suppose so. And quite frankly, a lot of them were learning, right? So they were enjoying themselves along the way.
Right. So it's like a development thing for a lot of folks too, and community thing, I imagine too.
Yep. They met a lot of new friends. A lot of people walked away with new connections, mentors, peers, and so it was a great time for everyone.
That's awesome. So before I get to you here, Selena, what were some of the challenges that stand in your way when you pull off a hackathon like this?
The interesting thing is, and this is why this whole thing of building one big project is kind of of crazy is because there's so much logistics around getting everyone together and understanding how to work together. So just about anything that could go wrong went wrong in one way, honestly, whether that's communication, coding problems. Actually, right before we were going to demo everything, the whole thing crashed. But the crazy thing is that, and this is the really magical part of this, everyone kind of came together and someone always knew how to fix things, and they would step forward and go and do it.
That's cool.
So yeah, every obstacle that could have happened came up, and we went in and fixed it.
That's
and
amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So I want to turn to you, Selena. So how did you connect with Jogo and create this app? And why did you want an app in the first place for your organization?
Hi, we met through an organization called C, which supports entrepreneurs within Winnipeg. I'm a part of this organization, so is Jogo. And I remember one day he approached me asking me what I need to build and elevate my company. And at that point, I truly had no idea what I wanted to have, what I needed actually, because we just actually launched the Reconciliation Road Challenge in September. So we had this conversation quite a few months ago. And so we were in the building phase of the organization and less about what is our future, what is our future goals. And so when he came to me with this idea, or he came to me and was like, what do you need? I truly had no idea. And so it took some time to think, okay, an app would be fantastic, but what would this app look like? What would we need it for? And we just kind of bounced off each other of, okay, an app would be fantastic to have education in it, but this app could do so much more than that. So we created this app that, well, not we, I had no part in it. I don't know how to hack. I don't know how to code, but they created this app that has education components, that has a feed component. So it's sort of like social media, but it's the whole premise of the app is you're learning by yourself, but you're truly never alone on the truth and reconciliation journey, because there's going to be other people, other organizations, and we have about 2,000 people that are going to be joining the app right away. The first month we launched, we got national recognition of the Reconciliation Road Challenge. And so there's going to be thousands of Canadians all across Canada going to be using this app. And I think that's the most beautiful part of it, is that you're not going to just be working within your organization on truth and reconciliation. This is going to be nationwide.
So tell me so it's called the Reconciliation Road Challenge?
Yes.
So tell me, maybe I'll start with you, Selena, and if you have anything, feel free to chime in here, Jogo. But how does it work? So you open up the app, and then what does it do, and what do people get from it?
Yeah, so it's completely different for organizations compared to employees. So organizations can go in, they can add employees to the app, and they can utilize the app in whichever way they want. They will be able to ask me for different education. So I'm going to have 12 different courses for every single month, and the organization can choose what topics they want to learn about. And then the employees get to access the education components as well as the feed, so they get to network with other individuals learning about truth and reconciliation. And then I just get to oversee all the organizations. I get to create surveys. I get to see everything that's happening, and it's just going to be a really great community of people on their path of truth and reconciliation.
And did you stay up for the 48 hours?
Oh, no. No.
No?
I could not. I was pretty much useless in the coding space. I was there to say, that looks really pretty, and that was
and
it.
You went to sleep.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's probably the smart thing to do. And I know you just had an event yesterday to launch actually the app yesterday evening. How'd that go?
It was fantastic. Going into this, I had only seen the prototype of the app, and so Jogo told me to have zero expectations, and so I had zero expectations going into this. And so I walked in, everyone was asking me how I was feeling, and I had no idea. I felt like a blur. It was so many emotions all at once. And then we got to the unveiling of the app, and I actually started to cry. And I was hiding it really well. I was tearing up because it was just really beautiful. And then it really started to hit me that 50 different people built this one incredible app just for my organization. And it was just so many emotions all at once. And I remember everyone came up to me afterwards, and they were talking about how it was such a great cause. And of course they wanted to help out. And the fact that it was going to an organization that's promoting truth and reconciliation is why they worked so hard. And I just kept crying and crying and crying. And it was just such a beautiful event. I couldn't have been more thankful for how everything turned out.
Well, kind of the making of this app itself is kind of an act of reconciliation itself, isn't it? I don't know, how did it feel for you, Jogo, to be part of that? Is this have you done anything like in the reconciliation space before when it comes to these hackathons?
Definitely not to this scales in particular. And in fact, even for hackathons, this has kind of been like a dream of mine for a long time, and to participate in one in person, and I've never been able to. And this is kind of part of the reason why I wanted to put this together. And so, yeah, it's a lot of like new things coming together. This is why I told Selena to not have any expectations. Anything could go wrong, but I'm glad it worked out so well. The project, actually, we had judges come in and appraise it, and it came down to being a $200,000 to $250,000 project. She had to pay someone to go.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a weekend, that was what we got built.
Wild. So is this the first of many hackathons for the future?
Yes, this is the very first Builders League edition. We'll be doing another one next year. So if anyone's ever interested in maybe being the next recipient of the project, have a good cause, or want to join in and support in any way possible, please reach out to me at origato.com.
And for yourself, Selena, what do people need to know about the app if they're interested in it?
Yeah, so my initial organization, the Community of Big Hearts, we teach truth and reconciliation workshops. You can reach out to us at the Community of Big Hearts, and then we would love to assist you on your truth and reconciliation journey.
Okay. Well, both of you, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and all the best. Hopefully you've caught up on some sleep, Jogo.
I will tonight.
Okay, good. Okay, good. And all the best with the app. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's Selena Starling. She is the CEO of Community of Big Hearts, and Jogo Iwasaki is the co-founder of Origato Creative Solutions Incorporated, the group behind the Hackathon.
It's a community built on industry, but there's a lot more to it than that. CBC's Communities in Focus is coming to Lac du Bonnet, October 7th to the 11th. I'm Emily Brass, and Lac du Bonnet, let's get to know each other. Share the stories of your community so CBC can share them with the province. CBC's Communities in Focus, Lac du Bonnet, October 7th to the 11th. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
7:45 right now here on Information Radio. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in this morning for Marcy Marcusa. Well, coming up on our series exploring the perspectives of people from our community who have had their lives changed in the past year and the war in the Middle East. A Palestinian Manitoban who says that we need to lean into our humanity to move forward. We also got a call on the listener line expressing some concern with an interview we had on yesterday, and it reflects the diversity of perspectives in Winnipeg's Jewish community.
Good morning. It's Julie Gard calling. I'm calling because I understand that it's a difficult situation for CBC in this matter over the October 7th and the people who you interview. However, I will point out, and I'm not sure how you would deal with this, but the speaker today, speaking on behalf of the Asper event, made a number of serious misstatements in his speech. First of all, he said nobody wants to hurt all the people in Gaza and the West Bank, and that's probably not true. Members of the Israeli cabinet have said that Gaza should be wiped off the face of the earth on a number of occasions. He also has equated, in the same sentence, anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. Obviously, these are two very different things, and you can be against what Israel is doing and still not be an anti-Semite. Most of us in the movement, in the pro-Palestine movement, are not by any means anti-Semitic, and many of us are Jewish or have Jewish spouses. Bye-bye.
That is a call we got yesterday from a caller. If you want to weigh in on anything here on our show, you can give us a call, 204-788-3205. Marcy Marcusa is in right now with a look at the commute. Hi, Marcy.
Hey. So obviously my voice isn't great, so that's why Corey and I switched roles this morning. But I love it because I picked up the traffic line and Ashley laughed. She's like, Marcy Marcusa! So she did not make up the thing just to call us and say hi. She actually did call, obviously, with a tip. So she says there's construction Archibald southbound, Marion to Elizabeth, and there's a blocked curb lane there. And then she added, I don't know why, because they just seem to have fixed it, but surprise, I think she said magic, it's there again. So if you're traveling through that part of St. B, you'll want to note that. So this is Archibald southbound Marion to Elizabeth. There's a blocked curb lane, 788-3093 if you want to reach us on the commuter line.
Thank you very much, Marcy. 7:48 right now here on Information Radio. And next on this show, a story about something so many of us take for granted, the ability to use a public washroom with privacy and dignity. And it turns out for some Manitobans living in a wheelchair, even washrooms deemed wheelchair accessible aren't actually that accessible. This weekend, Alex Litwin, who lives with cerebral palsy, wrote a first-person piece about the experience for the CBC Manitoba website. Wheelchair accessibility washroom stalls are often so small, he wrote, they need to keep the stall door open in order to fit in them. Then there's Darlene Tunney. After diabetes forced the amputation of her leg, she told CBC's Alana Cole last week how overnight her world got a lot smaller. Have a listen.
I enjoyed going out. I can't anymore because 90% of restaurants I either can't get into, or should I need to use the washroom, I cannot get into. They are not, they're just not accessible. They may have the handicap sticker on their door, but they're not wheelchair friendly.
That was Darlene Tunney talking to CBC's Alana Cole. Lindsay Cook is the CEO of Manitoba Possible, a nonprofit advocacy organization for persons who live with disabilities. As well, I'm joined here in studio by Darren Luke. He's the co-coordinator of community education and training with Manitoba Possible. He also has lived experience as a wheelchair user. Hello to you both.
Hi, Corey. Good morning.
So, Darren, I want to start with you. How much can you relate to what we just heard from Darlene?
Yeah, I think that's really important because a lot of people, what they think is accessible isn't really accessible. So when you're going into a bathroom, a lot of the times what I find is that the door will open towards the stall, or if it's in a hotel bathroom, it'll open towards the tub. And it doesn't allow you actually enough room to get into the bathroom and actually close the door. I was up north recently and was supposed to be in a accessible bathroom, and I had to transfer from my chair to the toilet and the toilet to the tub and then reverse. So it was 6 transfers just to go and have a shower. So it is a problem.
It must be exhausting too, I imagine.
It can get tiring, yes.
Mm-hmm. I know we in the first person piece by Alex Whitman, there's all these other aspects that people might not even think about too. So Alex Whitman, he wrote that, in his case, it's more complicated because he has a support person who's female. So they need to use a woman's washroom, and the stall door sometimes has to remain open because it can't fit all of them in it. And he says, it leaves him, and as I quote this here, full of embarrassment and without dignity. So what's your reaction to that, Darren?
I can sympathize with Alex on that one too, just because there's been times when either the bathroom's occupied or the stall's just too small, so I go searching for another bathroom somewhere within the vicinity. Sometimes it's a family bathroom, sometimes it's a female washroom, but it can be hard to find something that fits, particularly somebody with a support person, because that's fitting 2 people in a small stall, which is really difficult.
Lindsay, I want to turn to you. So Manitoba Possible, you're all about breaking down barriers like this one. But I'm so curious, what is it that, gets lost in translation when people design accessible washrooms that don't actually end up being accessible?
Yeah, thanks for that, Corey. I think number one, it's not talking to people that are going to use them, right? So that really is the place to start, is actually talking to disabled Manitobans with disabilities who are going to use these spaces and get firsthand expert consultation on what is actually accessible. The other challenge is that there isn't really a standardization. So we are lacking legislation that really clearly articulates what an accessible washroom should look like, what it should include. So there's room for improvement there for sure.
And I mean, what about you, Darren? Like, what do you think, needs to change the most?
Yeah, like Lindsay mentioned, legislation is a really important part. Manitoba started with the Accessibility Manitobans Act in 2013. If you go back to the United States, their Accessibility Disability Act has been around since 1990. And it's quite strong, so it forces people to make sure things are accessible.
In terms of the standards you'd like to see, what would be like the baseline things that you'd like to see across the board?
I think what's really quite nice is just having space. So having a large area where you can move around, get to what you need to do. I do see some bathrooms that are done very well. So they have change tables in them, all those things, and they could be just adult change tables as well. But space, having a sink within that washroom as well is very helpful. So that's usually the biggest thing, is just having a large space.
And is there any bathrooms in Manitoba that are like notorious, that everyone is like, that one, it says accessible, but it's just not?
I don't think I'm going to call out any particular places, but I would say, I would say as a business and employer, we've come across this even ourselves, where we've booked a space knowing that we'd have a number of people that would require accessible washrooms. We've been assured there's accessible washrooms, but unless you really lay eyes on them and have people go in there and use them and verify, you really can't trust that they're truly accessible.
Yeah, and it sounds like this is something you've always been advocating for, these standardized public washrooms. But how open has the government been to changing that legislation?
I think, what I'm really pleased to see is that Manitoba adopted the National Building Code 2020 last year. So that came into effect January of this year. And the National Building Code 2020 edition actually includes quite a lot of provisions for accessible washrooms. The challenge with that is that is for new builds and that's for significant renovations. So, the quote that you played earlier where they talk about 90% of the current stock of restaurants not being accessible. That's really not going to change that very quickly. There isn't other legislation planned under the AMA, which surprises some people. There will not be legislation that covers the built environment. There's advocacy efforts such as groups like Barrier Free Manitoba that are pushing to return to that built environment standard. But as it stands now, that will be designated to the building code, which will not have an impact on the vast majority of spaces currently inaccessible.
And as it turns out, actually, we have the Manitoba Premier, Wab Kinew, on the show on Friday. I know the NDP just passed a year in office. So what do you want him to know about, these ongoing challenges? Anything, improved for your life and mobility in the last 12 months, Darren?
Yeah, I think it's really important that there's quite a few changes that really need to be done, not just in Manitoba, but across Canada, I think. And we just want the Premier to understand that people with disabilities deserve the same rights as everybody else does.
I also know, I'll just say this as a young dad, I found accessible washrooms also very handy for myself. Accessible washrooms with change tables, with a place to put a stroller in and stuff. How much is that kind of universal design argument helpful when it comes to advocating for this?
100%. I mean, we always say that accessibility benefits everyone. And that's such a great example because if you think of automatic door openers, who benefits the most from that? I mean, a lot of people, but particularly parents with strollers, getting into spaces. So when you think of a universally accessible washroom, a non-gendered washroom, you can automatically think of all the groups that would actually benefit from a universal washroom that's non-gendered, that's also accessible. People with helpers, people with larger power wheelchairs, people who are non-binary. There's a lot of benefit when we look to include everybody.
Well, Lindsay, Darren, thank you so much for joining us this morning and all the best.
Thank you very much.
Lindsay Cook is the CEO of Manitoba Possible. Darren Luke is the trainer, Community Education and Support Services of Manitoba Possible. And thank you both for joining me this morning. And for more on this story, you can read Alex Litwin's first person. Just go to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Well, let's take a look at news headlines now with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, strike averted, and 25,000 healthcare support workers are to report for work as usual this morning. Talks between CUPE and the MGEU and Shared Health went right down to the wire. The strike deadline was 6 this morning. CUPE says the deal was reached at 4:25 this morning. CUPE President Gina McKay calls the tentative agreement substantial and says the unions are recommending the members accept the deal. Hundreds of people turned out last night for a vigil to remember the victims of the October 7th attacks on Israel. Nearly 1,200 Israelis were killed and 250 more taken hostage in a Hamas-led attack 1 year ago. A Jewish Federation of Winnipeg event last night drew a number of people, including Premier Wab Kinew. We'll hear what he had to say in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
7:57 right now, and still to come here on Information Radio. He says that 97 members of his family have died in Gaza since the war began. Another Manitoba weighs in as our series exploring perspectives since October 7th continues. here on the CBC Radio 1. Taking a quick look at your weather right now, 5 degrees right now here in, just dropped down to 4 degrees actually at the Forks, but we are heading to a very sunny high today of 19. Going to be dipping down to 7 though overnight, so you'll still get a little relief, a little more chill in the air for you. Still to come also, we're also going to keep keeping an eye on your commute. Still, it seems like there's not too many major issues besides southbound King Edward just past Dublin. There's a stall blocking the southbound curb lane. You'll want to keep left to get around that. You can give Marcy Marcusa a call on the CBC commuter line if you do see anything going on, 204-788-3093. I'm Corey Funk. Stay tuned. Much more to come. The World Report is standing by.
On Cue with Tom Power.
How do you become one of the world's most influential stylists when you have no formal training in fashion? Law Roach will tell you how his love for clothes took him from shopping in thrift stores with his grandmother to styling the likes of Zendaya and Celine Dion.
I almost had to build the plane while I was flying it.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
For decades, Jeannie Becker has known anyone who's anyone in the world of fashion. She's interviewed them all, and she now tells her life story through a series of garments that have shaped who she is. Jeannie Becker, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. The winner of this year's Nobel Prize in Physics is a Canadian. Geoffrey Hinton is known as the godfather of artificial intelligence. He's also a professor at the University of Toronto, and he is sharing the prestigious award with John Hopfield, a Princeton University researcher. The CBC's Julia Chapman has the details.
I'm flabbergasted. I had no idea this would happen. I'm very surprised.
Geoffrey Hinton received news of his Nobel Prize at a hotel in California. The University of Toronto professor won for his work in machine learning, training computers to recognize patterns in data. Hinton says the artificial intelligence era will be akin to the Industrial Revolution, but rather than surpassing human physical strength, technology will outstrip human intellectual powers. Geoffrey Hinton spent many years working for Google in AI development. He quit his role there last year, warning about the existential risks of the technology.
We also have to worry about a number of possible bad consequences, particularly the threat of these things getting out of control.
The two winners will share the prize money of 1.4 million Canadian dollars. Julia Chapman, CBC News, London.
Hurricane Milton is now a strong Category 4 storm barreling towards Florida's western coast. It is unpredictable. Milton quickly turned into a Category 5 hurricane yesterday before being downgraded this morning, but it could still pick up steam, and its exact course could change at any moment. That's why Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is telling everyone in the state to be prepared.
So just know it's possible that it could hit north of Tampa Bay, it could hit Tampa Bay, it could hit south of Tampa Bay somewhere in southwest Florida. But wherever it makes landfall, there's going to be impacts far beyond what the cone actually shows.
Hurricane Milton is expected to make landfall on the west coast of Florida late tomorrow, possibly early Thursday morning. Right now, it is packing winds of 250 kilometers an hour. And it's about 900 kilometers away from Florida's southwest coast. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is making the rounds on American television and podcasts. She's making her case for president with the election just 28 days away. In an interview with 60 Minutes last night, Harris was pushed on her presidential platform and her current record on issues like immigration and the war in Ukraine. The CBC's Ithel Musa joins me now from Washington. And Ithel, what can you tell us about Harris's latest sit-down interview?
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris was pressed on some key issues last night, including immigration, the economy, and the war in Ukraine. When it comes to the U.S. border, Harris refused repeatedly to say whether she should have acted earlier to restrict illegal immigration into the United States. Harris was also asked about how she planned to pay for her economic proposals, which include giving tax breaks to first-time home buyers and people starting small businesses. Here's what she had to say.
I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes. It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations.
On the war in Ukraine, Harris also said she would not sit down with Russian President Vladimir Putin to negotiate an end to the fighting without Ukraine's involvement.
Ethel, this morning, former U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to sit down with leaders in the Latino community, but he's made some controversial remarks about migrants.
Yes, and this is not the first time. In his latest interview on a radio talk show, Trump made some controversial comments regarding murders allegedly committed by immigrants living illegally in the U.S., saying it's, quote, in their genes. Trump was criticizing Kamala Harris's policies on the southern border when he made those statements, blaming her for an increase in crime allegedly committed by migrants. Trump's campaign team defends his recent comments, saying he was referring to murderers, not migrants.
Thank you, Ethel.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Ethel Musa in Washington. The Israeli army says more than 100 projectiles have been launched at the port city of Haifa within a single hour. Israel's Iron Dome intercepted the rockets, which came from Lebanon. This is one of the largest barrages to target the area since Israel and Hezbollah started exchanging fire. The IDF says it has expanded its ground incursion in southern Lebanon this morning. It says it has taken operational control of a Hezbollah compound there, and it claims to have killed a key Hezbollah leader in Beirut. In Ottawa, Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly is demanding an apology from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. He accused Joly of pandering to supporters of Hamas yesterday in the House of Commons. Later at a memorial in Ottawa, Poilievre paid tribute to the victims of the October 7th attack. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was also there. As Tom Perry tells us, there were sharp differences in the two leaders' speeches and the responses they received.
It is now my honor to welcome the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to the podium.
A respectful but by no means gushing welcome as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau offered sympathy and support to the Jewish community and called out Israel's enemies by name.
Terrorist organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps still seek to harm Jews just because they are Jews.
That part of Trudeau's message was well received, though it was the next speaker who got the loudest applause.
Shalom. Merci.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre had some standing and cheering, with a speech that blamed the Liberals for rising anti-Semitism in Canada and vowed a Conservative government would pursue policies at home and abroad that were staunchly pro-Israel.
I will vote against anti-Israel resolutions at the United Nations. I will back Israel's right to defend itself, which includes retaliating against those that attack Israel.
Poilievre says he'd back Israeli strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities and oil installations on a night that had a memorial feeling at times more like a political rally. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
The main suspect in the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann has been cleared of a series of sexual offenses in an unrelated trial. 47-year-old Christian Bruckner is already serving a jail term in Germany for rape. This morning, he was acquitted of multiple sexual abuse charges. They date back to a time period between 2000 and 2017 in Portugal. Bruckner has not been charged in the case of Madeleine McCann. The British girl disappeared in Portugal in 2007 and has never been found. An Ontario judge says a longtime volunteer with Scouts Canada was wrongfully dismissed. 86-year-old Wayne Hannon spent more than 70 years at the organization, but his latest application renewal was denied. An Ontario Superior Court justice is suggesting his age may have been a factor. The CBC's Guy Kenville reports.
This is what my Queen Scout, which at the time it was the highest level you could obtain as a scouting award.
In the office of his Ottawa lawyer, Wayne Hannon shows off a table's worth of Scouts Canada accolades going back decades, including a paddle with his name carved in it.
They apparently had to send it to Toronto to get my name in the scout troop, and this is their...
Hannon has been sharing seafaring skills with Scouts since the days of Diefenbaker. 3 years ago, after his wife died.
Well, it was the major thing for me to do.
Last November, though, Hannon's application to renew his volunteer status was denied. Scouts Canada cited safety concerns and said he was resistant to program adaptation. But now, an Ontario Superior Court judge says there was no compelling evidence against Hannon. He also notes the case involved suggestions of age discrimination that could warrant a look from Ontario's Human Rights Tribunal, and that Scouts Canada, in relying on hearsay evidence, was deeply unfair to an elderly and long-serving volunteer like Hannon.
There was no safety concern, and
lawyer Sean Grassi says the case also shows volunteers have a basic right to fairness, and that it's sad Hannon had to go to court over it.
His main goal has always been to get back out on the water, and we're hopeful that this decision provides a pathway for him to do that.
The judge ordered Scouts Canada to consider any new application from Hannon. Scouts Canada declined an interview and says it's taking the decision seriously and is mulling its next steps. Guy Kenville, CBC News, Ottawa.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, coming up this hour on the show, we're going to hear more from the newly minted Nobel Prize winner for physics, who's Canadian. We're going to hear about his message for future generations of scientists. Plus, he says that 97 of his family members have died in Gaza since the war began. Another Manitoban weighs in as our series exploring perspectives continues. 1 year since October 7th. That's coming up all right here on Information Radio. Stay tuned. At 8:11 right now. Let's take a look at news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, they talked through the night, and less than 2 hours before this morning's strike deadline, they reached a tentative deal. A strike by 25,000 healthcare support staff in Manitoba has been averted. The workers, members of CUPE and MGEU, are being told this morning the strike is postponed and they are to show up for work as usual. Dale Edmonds at CUPE calls this a substantial deal and says the unions are recommending acceptance. A former high school football coach convicted of sexually abusing players was sentenced to 20 years in prison yesterday. Kelsey McKay pleading guilty last year to multiple counts of sexual assault and luring. We're going to hear some reaction to that sentence in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells at our CBC news desk. Well, looks like a very summery October day ahead of us today, Abby.
It is, and we're already seeing the sun make its appearance in most of the regions. The southern regions already seen sunshine from Brandon, Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach, and Morris, all seeing the sunshine at this time, the sunrise at this time rather. Brandon at 4, Dauphin at 1, Gimli 0, Steinbach and Morris both hovering around 7 degrees, and we'll be getting close to 20 degrees. Right now in Winnipeg, we are at 5 degrees. We've gone up by 1 again. Clear skies out there. We're going to see beautiful sunny conditions today. We're warming up to a high of 19 and a light southwest breeze developing sometime this afternoon. afternoon, and then that will stay with us all through the night when we cool off to about 7 degrees. And then for tomorrow, it's going to be more sunshine on the way with another set of, lights out breeze in the morning. But right now, we are at 5 degrees and heading to a high of 19.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Marcy Marcusa is doing my job today. We're doing a little switcheroo.
Yep.
And yeah, and she's answering calls on the commuter line. Hello.
Hey, everybody can hear why. So I won't elaborate. All right, I'm trying to save my voice here, but there are a number of things developing in traffic. Ben just called us. He said this was brutal. He said Portage at Barrie is done. That was his language. He is Portage at Barrie eastbound. There's construction there that takes it to 2 lanes, but he says it's just a standstill. It's super slow. Franz called us around 8 o'clock, said a train was stopped and then going slow. Notre Dame before Valor Road. So that may be cleared by now, but call us an update if we need. Also, we have the cross-city commuter that called saying 2 stalled cars northbound Pembina at Abinogi Mcons. So first of all, that's the first one in the curb lane. Then you move a little further along in the median lane, there's another stall. So you're going to dipsy-doodle around all of that. In addition, King Edward, a reminder, just past Dublin, there's a stall blocking southbound curb lane. Stay left to pass. That one may be cleared. That one came in earlier this morning. Ashley said construction, Archibald at Marion, southbound, Marion to Elizabeth, block curb lane there. And finally, Cumberland Avenue is closed eastbound, all lanes, between Hargrave and Donald. And just a reminder, that's closed for water work, and it's going to last until October 11th. 788-3093 is the CBC commuter line if you want to reach us.
Well, next on the show, we're listening to different perspectives from Manitobans who have had their lives changed in the past year since October 7th and resulting in the war in the Middle East. We've been doing this all week. And our next guest is Louay El Ghoul. He's a lawyer, business owner, and father of 3 in Winnipeg. And he says he is a human Palestinian Canadian. And as you're about to hear, the losses that he says his family has suffered during the war are unimaginable. He spoke with CBC's Marcy Marcusa via Zoom yesterday. She asked how his life has changed in the past year.
It's been difficult on myself and my family, but I don't. Whatever changes has happened to me, it's really negligible compared to what's happening in my family in Gaza. We lost over 97 members of my family since October 7th. Myself, I was hospitalized for a heart condition in March 5th of this year, and again in August. As much as we say we want to live for our family and our children, it's unfortunately affects everybody who calls himself a human, especially if you're very closely related to that part of the world.
97 family members. What is that even? I can't imagine. Are you just consistently getting phone calls from relatives and being that you're in connection with?
Yes. As of this morning, I was in contact with one of my cousins. They've been displaced. This is their 4th time now. They live in Khan Yunis again. There's no homes. They live in tents basically. They've sent me the latest video they've sent me. It's horrifying. And these are people who are well educated. They are of course parents and children, but they also are producing members of the human race in general, whether it be engineers and whatever their profession is. To have them live this way, it's horrifying. And I think that the problem I'm having as this continues is the conflict I'm getting inside of me between what I used to believe to be a rule that applies to everybody, and now it seems to be selective to some people. I remember 1994 very clearly because I was on the streets supporting South Africa. I remember other events in the world where I supported also human rights all over the world, and I don't remember anybody saying that, for example, racism or apartheid is not okay except for certain conditions. No, it's not. It's always not okay.
You describe yourself, you identify, you shared with me as a human Palestinian Canadian. Tell me about that and why you've chosen the word human first.
I think I think we are, as everybody knows, the term human applies to us as the human being. But to be honored by being called a human, you have to have a conscience. You have to have a care for other human beings, regardless of their color, ethnicity, background, religion. You have to be part of that race. You have to really take care and take part in it. And I hope that I have earned that privilege. We have people who might have been born as a human, but they do not earn that title, unfortunately, when they actually have. Again, I'm not being selective in any religion or race or ethnicity. I think, unfortunately, that applies to everywhere in the world. There are racists and there are extremists and there are people who have no compassion except for their own group.
We are doing interviews this week, hearing a number of perspectives from Manitobans, as I said. One of the things that we heard is a new group that's coming together called Friends of Standing Together. And it's some Winnipeggers coming together. When some are Jewish, some are Palestinian. I'm wondering what your thoughts are just in terms of moving forward in Manitoba.
I think that's the only way to survive. That's the only way to coexist. And it's not a new concept.
How confident do you feel to be able to be your full self in Manitoba right now? Or are you, I've heard from a lot of people that frankly said they didn't feel safe from all sides, even going on the air and speaking with me about anything to do with, with the conflict overall, with the wider war, and also with a year later. They just didn't feel safe to do so. So I'm wondering what your sensibilities are like here in Manitoba right now.
I want to say, Marcy, that giving into this fear would be a problem for us as Manitobans and as a human race. I think we all have to get together, whether we are Palestinians or Israelis or Manitobans or whoever we are, and fight those who are racist and fight those who cause this fear, regardless of their background. We unite together, as you said initially. We have to unite together. We have to coexist. We have to be friends together to fight those who are extremists who are trying to cause us harm as Manitobans, as a human being people. But yes, there are concerns, but I don't let it affect me or my children. I just find people who have the same mindset as mine, and we hold on together.
I'm so sorry for your losses. The human being in me doesn't have words for the loss of 97 family members, but thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
That was Louay Al Ghul, a local lawyer, business owner, and father of 3 in Winnipeg, and a, quote, human Palestinian Canadian. If you have a perspective you want to share, you can call us on our listener line anytime, 204-788-3205. That's 204-788-3205. And tomorrow, we continue our series. Do you need to go on a digital information diet to restore your ability to engage with other Manitobans face-to-face over contentious issues? Well, we're going to hear about that as we continue our coverage of 1 year since the war in the Middle East developed.
Coming up on today's call-in conversation, it's Fire Prevention Week, and we want to know what questions you have about preventing fires in the home. We'll be joined by Doug Sinclair, Public Education Coordinator with the Winnipeg Fire and Paramedic Service. He'll tell us what starts most fires in the home and what you should do if a fire breaks out. That's coming up on Radio Noon.
Yeah, that call-in conversations happens every day here on Radio Noon, and you can call in at 12:30. But if you have an opinion right now you want to share, and maybe you're not able to call in live, there is a listener line for Radio Noon, 204-788-3797. That's 204-788-3797. You can leave your question, comment, story, and give it a listen. It might make it to air today at 12:30. Well, next on the show, Geoffrey Hinton is a winner of the Nobel Prize for Physics for pioneering work on artificial intelligence. Hinton and his co-winner, American John Hopfield, are being honored for helping lay the foundation for the technology that promises fundamental change in all areas. He is Canadian, and he spoke with CBC's David Common earlier this morning about his win and had a message for future generations of scientists.
At about 1:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed, and it was a call from Sweden. My first reaction was, how do I know if this is a spoof call? I wasn't expecting this at all. I didn't know I'd been nominated. I never expected to win the Nobel Prize in Physics. But the guy had a Swedish accent, and there were a bunch of them I talked to with Swedish accents, so I guess it's real.
What goes through your mind as you are awarded a Nobel Prize?
I was just flabbergasted.
And describe for us the work that the committee, the Royal Academy, is recognizing today.
They recognized two pieces of work. One was work that I did with Terence Zanofsky on something called the Boltzmann machine, which is a way of getting Hopfield networks to learn more complicated things. That was very interesting work, but it's not what led to these big chatbots today. So there was other work I did with David Rumelhart, who unfortunately died very young of a nasty brain disease. He was my mentor when we worked on backpropagation, which is a way to get neural networks to learn, and that's what's used in all the big chatbots today. That's what's caused the revolution.
We talk a lot about artificial intelligence these days, and you have been there from its advent in many ways. You've also more recently expressed concerns about artificial intelligence, and I wonder how you reckon with it in the moment that you are particularly again in the spotlight because of this Nobel win.
I think it's very important that good young researchers work now on the issue of can we retain control so that when we produce things more intelligent than ourselves, they don't want to take control away from us. And we don't know how to do that. What we do know is we should get good young researchers working on it, and we should get governments to force the big companies to provide the resources needed for safety research. So if you look at what's happening in OpenAI, originally they were very concerned with safety. More recently, they've become much more concerned with profits, and most of their safety researchers have left. And we need governments to insist that they worry about safety.
This is, I suppose, the pinnacle of your science career. I wonder what you would say to young enthusiasts, those who will follow in your footsteps out there.
Follow your curiosity. So the best research comes out of being curious about how things work. Everybody's curious. And science is just being efficient about your curiosity so that you discover how things actually work. And follow your curiosity. That's how you get the best research done.
I like that. Science is just being efficient about your curiosity. That's Nobel Prize winner, British Nobel Prize winner, Geoffrey Hinton speaking in California earlier today. A quick traffic update here for folks. Cross City commuter just called earlier to say that there's two stalled cars on northbound Pembina. One is in the curb lane right before Abenoji Mikana. And then another is just a little bit further up, just a block or two in the median lane. So look out for that as well. Portage at Barrie, eastbound Portage at Barrie, very, very slow right now as well. Well, AHI, as it's spelled, if you're wondering, has a new album on the way, and it's the fourth studio album from the Toronto-based folk singer. This is the latest song he's shared. It's a song of resistance and unity. From AHI, this is My People.
All rise, despite how they divide, when we unite, with our backs to the shadow, when we walk through the battle, marching till the light falls. This is what we're made for. Till morning, stay strong, my brave souls. Can we carry on with our backs to the shadow, and we don't see the battle, marching till the light falls. This is why we sing. My people, the restless, unequal. We pray for the day we shine good on the evil. Down, down, they can't keep us. Down, down, they can't keep us. Down, down, they can't keep us. Lord, this is for my people. is for my people. Fear us, cause we're fearless. Get louder, they don't hear us. With our backs to the shadow, when we walk through the battle, marching till the light falls. This is what we're made for. My people, the race is unequal. We pray for the day we shine good on the evil. Down, down, they can't keep us. Down, down, they can't keep us. Down, down, they can't keep us. Lord, this is for my people. This is for my people. This is for my people.
How can you not get your claps on with that? Marcy Marcusa
Right?
and I in studio.
So good.
Oh, such good vibe. Speaking of my people, you're my people, Marcy.
That's nice.
And we were talking before because Radio Noon today, they're talking about fire safety. And you actually have a bit of a story.
I do. I think it's such a good call in. So Corey's obviously helping fill in because my voice is a little bit going this morning. But I want to share this because I think a lot of us feel like we know fire prevention until something happens. So in the 90s, my sister was celebrating with a boyfriend for Valentine's Day and having a fondue. And they got into trouble and the fondue pot was a little bit too flaming.
Ooh.
And it was one of those moments where you're not thinking, you're just trying to prevent something, but you're not really thinking. And so the oil, they went to pour the oil. And it poured, a tiny bit went out into the bathroom sink. The entire bathroom lit aflame. Oh. Like that's how quickly that happens because you're not supposed to be doing that. That's not how you deal with a fondue fire and burning grease.
No.
But in that moment when you're nervous, your initial thought is, okay, I got to put this those things can happen so fast. And I'll never forget it because the entire bathroom was up in flames. And it was my parents' home. They were away and my sister was having her boyfriend over for this Valentine meal and their house could have gone. So I just really want to encourage everybody, if you have questions about fire prevention, please call noon today and call between 12:30 and 1, get your advice. There are no silly questions around this. It's all about safety. So 788-3797 if you want to leave a message.
And share your stories as well, like Marcy's. I'm sure everyone does, and it's helpful to know as well. Could lead to some good advice as well. Thanks for that, Marcy. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is 5 degrees. It's going to be a beautiful day. Sunshine well above seasonal. The seasonal high this time of year is actually 12. Today, we're headed to 19, even warmer tomorrow. Well, it came right down to the wire early this morning, but a tentative deal will keep Manitoba's healthcare support staff on the job and off the picket line. The strike deadline was 6 o'clock this morning. At 4:25, an agreement was reached between CUPE, the MGEU, and Shared Health. CUPE President Gina McKay calls this tentative deal substantial.
We've been able to reach an agreement that recognizes and respects the important work we do as part of the healthcare team. This is prioritizing recruitment and retention. We can't go into all the details of the agreement because it will come in the days to come. But right now, we've agreed to suspend all job action.
McKay says everyone is to report to work as usual this morning. She says online information sessions will be held ahead of a vote by the membership. And McKay says the unions are recommending members accept this deal. A disgraced former Winnipeg high school football coach has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for sexually abusing 9 players for more than a decade. In handing down the sentence, Judge Raymond Wyant told Kelsey McKay there is no cure for the havoc he wreaked. Monique Saint-Germain is the lawyer for the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. She says it is one of the longer sentences we've seen in Manitoba for a former coach.
But we have to keep in mind that there were a number of victims here. And years of devastation for them. So This is a sentence that is reflective of where we're at as a society in terms of denouncing this type of behavior.
St. Germain says there were many instances of questionable behavior by McKay, like having students over to his home. She says policies need to be in place to prevent that kind of activity and make it easier for people to report. Hundreds of people turned out last night for a vigil to remember the victims of the October 7th attacks on Israel. Nearly 1,200 Israelis were killed and 250 more taken hostage in a Hamas-led attack 1 year ago. The Jewish Federation of Winnipeg organized a walk for Israel at the Asper Jewish Community Campus. Premier Wab Kanu was there, telling the group the province is with them.
I want to say the challenging moments of stress, worried about loved ones, the experiences of that terrible tide of anti-Semitism, that we've got your back, and we will continue to support you through this difficult period.
Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham and federal MPs Ben Carr and Marty Morantz also spoke at the vigil. Well, the day after ceremonies around the world marking the first anniversary of the October 7th attacks, the related wars in the Middle East rage on. The Israeli military says more than 80 projectiles were launched today from Lebanon into northern Israel. Most of those projectiles were intercepted, but Israeli media is airlifting footage of damage to the buildings near the coastal city of Haifa. The IDF also says it has killed a senior Hezbollah commander and strikes today on Hezbollah targets in Beirut. Well, the CRTC is calling on Canada's largest cell phone carriers to lower their international roaming fees. The country's telecommunications regulator says Bell, Rogers, and TELUS have until November 4th to inform it of, quote, concrete steps they're taking in the matter, noting it will launch a formal public proceeding if sufficient progress is not being made. Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne asked the CRTC to look into the wireless roaming fees last year. You can find more news as it's updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Have a lovely morning.
I will. You too.
Yeah. That is Heather Wells at our CBC News Desk. Thanks to our whole news department as well this morning. Megan Ketchison, as well as Joni Nicolo in the news department. Let's just take a quick look at your commute right now. Southbound King Edward, just past Dublin, there's a stall blocking the southbound curb lane. Keep left to get around that as well. On northbound Pembina, right before Abinoji-Mekina, there's a stall in the right lane as well. When you go a little bit further up, actually, you get a stall in the median lane as well, says the cross-city commuter. So look out for that as well. Eastbound Portage at Barrie, we got a call that's also very, very, very slow right now. So a couple issues to look out for on your commute. And Abby, let's take one out. Let's look at weather.
We're going to see mostly sunny skies, mild temperatures, highs ranging from 5 in Churchill to 22 for Brandon. Winnipeg is currently sitting at 5 degrees right now. We do warm up actually to 19 by the afternoon period, and other regions will be enjoying similar sunny conditions with highs around the 20s. So it's a beautiful day. Just enjoy it, and some light south breeze. You will definitely feel that.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Ediemi. He is working the controls this morning. Also, big thanks to Kevin Nipatebo, who's making us look real pretty on YouTube this morning. As well, Marcy Marcusa, who usually sits here in the host seat, took my job this morning as director covering your commute. Thank you very much, Marcy. And I'm Corey Funk. Marcy and I actually are going to be off the show tomorrow because we're going to be heading out to Lac de Bonnie tomorrow. Lac de Bonnet. It's a whole thing. Maybe you're going to do a story on it. We're going to be out there tomorrow, and we're going to be doing a show live from Drifters Inn on Thursday morning. So we'll be off the show tomorrow morning, but we'll be back Thursday from Lac de Bonnie. Thanks so much to everyone who tuned in, and thanks to all the APs who put the show together, as well as our senior producer of audio, Leif Larson, and our show producer, Nelly Gonzalez. I'm Corey Funk. I hope whatever you find yourself doing on this beautiful October day, you find yourself doing something you love with the people you love. The Current is next.